Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? It is lovely to be here. I have not streamed in a while. Oh, I gotta turn it on public. That's right, public. There we go. Okay. There we go. I'm now streaming. For some reason it says category gaming, but I don't know why. Okay. Stream here. Stream is live. Okay. Yeah, there you go, everyone. So, hi there, everybody. It's great to be here. I haven't streamed in a while. Nice embed. I don't know how to do that or anything. Can we all hear me? Oh, got it. Yeah, I think we're good. It's been forever since I streamed, so I figured I would. Some people were wanting stream. Oh, wait, it says private. I don't think it's private, right? It says public. Hi there. Oh, wonderful. I think we're good. You can hear. I'm so thrilled. Howdy. Welcome, everyone. The thumbnail's a little wrong, but who cares, right? Obama, welcome. I might do some requests. I normally don't, but I've been practicing a little request taking. If you have any music questions, I'd be glad to answer that. I might teach some stuff on music whiteboard. I got my camera set up so that I can do that as well. And I also have some beats in the background, so I may just go jam on some of that too. But for now, I'll just play some piano. You can just relax. How's everyone's Friday been? I'm quite excited. I feel like I had a pretty good week, super hectic and busy. I have so many meetings and things I need to get through, but I've been quite grateful for the universe. You should do ASMR Pico Pumpy? Yeah, I should. That's what everybody said for years, but I just don't know, what do you even do when you do ASMR? Do you just like talk or what? Can someone explain to me in chat what you do to do ASMR? Also, if anyone wants to ask any philosophy questions or music questions, that's fine too. I'm going to go ahead and post this in my Discord as well so that my peoples can join and enjoy some music, jamming, everybody. Live stream, heart sign. Ooh, okay, lovely. The old thumbnail. Okay, old thumbnail. I might not be playing Melee today. Actually, I can't play Melee because my fast monitor is turn gain, make it soft. Oh, yeah, but I mean, like, you just talk quietly. Is that what ASMR is? How do you learn to make music? Well, first off, just get some instrument or some software or something in front of you and literally just start playing. That's the best way to first start learning how to make music. And then after you get your sort of beak wet a little bit, then you can look for more order, more organization, other stuff beyond that. But I think the first goal you want to do at any point in time is just literally play. There's nothing, close your eyes and just make random stuff, literally. As long as you play it with an intent to form it and voice it a certain way, you'll start to feel a flow and a release across it. That's actually something I'm really grateful for. I started music kind of as a percussionist, and so with percussion, it's kind of, there's not really clear pitch, most of the time, unless you're playing like marimbas and stuff, right? Good evening, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate that. But the thing I've always loved about percussion is you learn how to be melodic without playing pitches. You learn how to be structural without there being pitch. You learn how to create dramatic contour with just literally tapping on stuff, and that's going to transfer to everything else you do musically. It doesn't matter if it has pitch, doesn't matter if it's harmony or form or orchestration or anything like that. Let's see. So that's how I would recommend learning music. First, just do it. There's not a certain thing you have to do in order for you to learn how to make music. You just start making it and you figure out stuff, and as you go, then you want to learn more structure. The way I think about learning most skills in general is they tend to work in a process of, and this is where people get trapped. Skills tend to work in a way where you have a contraction and an expansion, and then you integrate the skill so it's fully embodied. So there's times where you reduce it and you come back into something that's more theoretical or more abstract or more representative like that, right? But then you have to give up all of the tools, all the desire to want to know and control and have certainty, and go into the uncertain place and just make and see what happens. So I think of that as almost like when you practice a skill, you want to practice both kind of like a bottom-up causality and a top-down. Bottom-up causality, you start with, how does this thing sound? Okay? You learn what that's called. You learn the structure of it. You learn what it means. You learn facts about it. You learn maps and structures. But then top down, that's not your goal, though, is to have maps and structures and all this stuff. The goal is to express whatever you want to express, right? So you actually have to practice using your intention as a whole point and as a whole channel and pushing your intention through into the music without any structure, without any form, without any guidance. And so that's kind of top down. And I see this a lot with students. Like one thing that I study a lot is perceptual theory in particular. I'm a big fan of embodied cognition, the theory that's came out of that, and all the empirical research that's happened in the last 25 years, which has been really groundbreaking. And one of the things that we observe over and over is that like we don't, okay, so perception is action, and action is perception. They're inextricably bound. And the way that you develop better perception is through action. But ironically, the way that you sharpen your actions to achieve what you want is through perception. So you're necessarily stuck in this kind of tautology where it's like, well, you have to take an action in order to understand what you're perceiving. But then again, if you don't understand what you're perceiving, then the actions can't organize how you want them to. So we have to integrate it. We build the ground a little, then we go expand and we focus on what we want to achieve without any guides, without any principle. We just do the thing and we try to make all of it come into the world. And through the process of trying to struggle with the big picture stuff and bring all that in, we learn a whole base of new stuff. And then all that new stuff we have, then it changes how we think. Then we restructure and we describe that and we ground it and we discuss it and make a map out of the meanings that we've had and the grounded content that we have. Then we jump right back to the big level and we make stuff that we want again. And so we have this kind of approach where we're cyclically generating, where we're sort of in a spiral, building and building progressively as we go. Do you like J.D. Beck? Yeah, their stuff's all right. Definitely, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan, but yeah, of course. I think they're great musicians. Let's see. How do you learn all those advanced microtonal terms? Well, I didn't. I made a bunch of sound first. And then after I made a bunch of sound, I had an intuition about how things sound. And then I went and studied microtonal theory. You know, when I first got started with microtonal stuff, I literally just laid notes out on the keyboard that were microtonal. Originally, I was playing in like 31 and just intonation on a piano and just playing stuff and seeing what happens. And then once I heard stuff that happened, then I learned theory, and that theory was grounded from the beginning throughout the process, and it remains grounded, and I keep it grounded the whole way through, because if it doesn't actually mean something to you, like in your sensory motor like space, then it doesn't have any ability for you, right? Fact statements don't allow you to achieve desired outcomes. Your desired outcomes are achieved through action, and your actions are mediated through perception. Your perceptions are gained through sensory motor interaction. And fact statements can transpose based on what ground you have, but they're no replacement. Is there a baseline level of singing talent you need to be a good sounding singer? No, of course not. No one starts as a good singer. Everybody comes out of the womb as a neonatal, we're neonatal before we're even born, intrauterine, and then we come out as a being. And, by the time we're already born, we already have pitch perception, we already have rhythm perception, we already have harmony perception. And we've been developing that for like 3 months before we even exited and came into the world. So no, you don't need some specific vocal capacity to become a good singer. Everybody starts similarly in a place, but some people gain stronger grounds when they're younger, or they just figure out things quicker, so it looks like they have ability when they get started. But nope, you just start singing. And of course, lessons can certainly help, because then you're working with someone who has an ability, and you have a co-evolutionary feedback loop where they get to temper your expectations, temper your perception of yourself and your feedback of yourself. But then when the teacher goes away, we want to have that feedback loop still spiraling. Some people have genuine tone death. That's called amusia, and it's an extremely small minority of the population. And even people with amusia can still develop interaction around sound. They can learn how to represent what they are experiencing in a way that's relevant to what they want. And the people with amusia, they don't have arrhythmia. That's a different thing, actually. Beat blindness is a different thing, even rarer. And I haven't seen any clear cases of beat blindness that don't seem like they can be solved. Because the problem is, if we didn't have rhythm, we wouldn't be able to we wouldn't actually be able to operate in the world, because rhythm is essentially just the prediction. I mean, well, it depends on what you define rhythm to be. More broadly, I think of it as stuff happening against stuff in time. So everything has rhythm to it in some capacity. But if we're thinking more like what rhythm does and offers us, it's organization. When I do an action and I move the world, like even when I'm walking in rhythm. I breathe in rhythm. Like rhythm is there for us the whole way through. So beat blindness, I haven't really seen any cases of people who can't improve that. And even the cases of amusia, very few times it's congenital amusia. Oftentimes people think they have amusia when they don't have amusia, and they just haven't practiced learning how to hear pitch. And it is a skill. It's not something that we just have. I mean, we have an inference for it early on, but it's a skill still. You play Melee? Holy, never knew that. I'm addicted. Yes, the last time I streamed, I played Melee, actually, and piano and stuff like that. Any advice for ear training? A lot of it. Quite a lot. Ear training happens the same way every time. It's about first identifying the thing in question, then relating it to other things, and then taking notions of those things, and then using those notions into action, then grounding those actions, and then trying to get rid of those, and then to sharpen the discrimination, sharpen the comparative listening, and then you have to go use it. Ear training doesn't matter if you're in a vacuum training your ear. That does nothing for you. That's how you start. That's what the bottom-up causality, right? Where you build your inferences of the ear, but then in order to make it mean something, you have to start again from the top and do big actions. And when you do the big actions, then you have to use the small inferences that you built to observe the thing that you found in the actual whole action. Then it cycles through. There's a lot of ear training stuff. I'm actually giving a lecture on ear training next Sunday for Johnny Reinhardt's Microtonal University stuff. So I'll be doing that. I'll be recording that and uploading it to this YouTube channel and my Patreon. So of course, once again, if you haven't checked out my Patreon, you should. I've been a little less active on it lately, but not because I haven't been doing stuff, but because I've been working on writing, grounding my theories, even making more art. I've also been finishing stuff. Throughout December, I had to build a new computer because my old computer is busted and blue screened constantly. So now that I have a new computer, I can actually finish a bunch of projects. Like, for example, Hex opens up so fast, and even crazy tracks that are super dense, I can open them now on stream and actually play cool stuff on stream for everybody. I can go through my projects without them lagging and breaking. Someone says, I think it's incredible the way mathematics is used in music. It's only used for a description. That's important to keep in mind. Musicians aren't using math when they're making music. They're using the sound, using their ground of experience, and driving that. And math can give us interesting inferences about structure. It can give us interesting inferences about construction and logic, but it doesn't do anything for us. No matter how good the logic is, you can't, that doesn't turn into action. The action, thank you so much, Nandra. That's a crazy super chat. I'm super appreciative for that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. But you don't do the math when you make the thing. You sit and touch the notes, and the notes come back, and then you react to them, and you build that loop, and you build that process. And so no chain of fact statements turns into ability. Only a chain of experience tempered and grounded through action turns into ability. That's why, I could read a fact statement about how to be the best keyboard player in the universe, or not keyboard, but like tennis player, as I always use with my students in analogy, right? There could be a formula that maps the specific way the muscles act in tennis, and how the ball flows, and what the most optimal strike path is, and that doesn't change anything I'm going to do when I play it, unless I already have a tremendous amount of experience, and then I can transpose that logic into something grounded. But the logic itself is it's groundless, essentially. Well, that's the thing, is since math presupposes the law of identity, A equals A, it literally detaches it from a ground. It says the ground is the thing. So when you say one, it's like, one what? Well, one, of course, 1 equals 1, that's identity. And so then you're completely disconnected from physical objects, although you're actually not disconnected. Embodied cognition demonstrates that over and over, that even our most abstract concepts still have grounding in motor sensory capacity, unless it's literally like a brand new novel thing that we've never experienced. But then if we already have experience in abstraction, we experience a new abstraction, we can often transpose that into our seated cognition so that we have it as a sensory motor ability, or at least it relates to that in one way or another. Math helps with the ability to perform well, but it doesn't translate into create. I don't understand that at all. It doesn't even help with the ability to perform well. How does it help the ability to perform well? No musicians doing math equations while they're performing. It can help them organize ahead of time Like, okay, I'm going to work on rhythms and permutate, right? Or I can work on this thing and do it this way, but it doesn't translate into action. Only experience and ability and action against your perception translates into action. Let's see what you said, pseudonym. I'll read what you said there. Let's see. I don't see what you said. I think it was about, am I going to Genesis? I would like to. I don't know when it is. I'd have to look. I forget what date it is. What date's Genesis? Post it in chat. What are some Zen chords you think that are pop music ready? I see you're thinking the Nim 7, the neutral minor 7 chord is pop candidate ready. I mean, literally kind of like all of them, as long as they're used properly. I don't really think that pop ready is not so much. I mean, I don't think that you're gonna like replace like the regular pop chords with like all these like weird chords and that will be pop. No, but the way that you use them and the way like I could see a use for an even super crazy whatever chord, like for a hit at like a dramatic drop or something, or like a, you know, certain moments. That's the thing, is music's a lot more than pitch. There's the rhythm and the orchestration and the form and the dynamics and the articulation and the content that's more irreducible than just quality itself. And so I think any of the structures are pop ready if they're used in the right way. So I think it's more about I think having it be pop ready is more about usage. It's less about what pitch combinations ready. But in general, I mean, any tuning version of chords that already sound familiar can be plugged into pop pretty easily, like even just a basic harmonic major 7, or really anything. I think naiadic chords are pop ready, but not, once again, they're not going to be like the chorus of a pop, but texture and like different moments. So it just depends on what context you're talking about. If I don't have an instrument, does a DAW work the same? Yeah, kinda. I mean, as long as you're listening and you're doing a lot of action, it can help. It definitely is useful to have a physical instrument that you mash around on and figure out some of that. But yeah, as long as you're listening. And there's a cricket in my chimney, literally chimney crickets. It's been there for like the last like 2 days. I don't know. Okay. Admiration from Brazilian fan. Thank you. Love from America. Seventh partial has a history of common pop. Yeah, that's a good example. I mean, right. So like a 4/7 that shows up in pop music and sort of a cappella. It could show up in pop music tomorrow and no one would even notice, really. There's a lot of things like that. Making something pop ready is kind of more about making someone not realize that it's microtonal. So it you know, it doesn't sound outstanding. It doesn't sound novel when the person experiences it, but it is a novel structure. But then the way it's been integrated into the overall form and the composition makes it feel really natural, or really typical, basically. Rhythm, I guess, duration, dynamics. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but duration is a big part of rhythm. My ability to play with a metronome is way behind my other skills. Should I start with simple things, learning timing, or should I stick with complex? I mean, personally, that's one of those questions, right? Well, you should start with the complex stuff if you're trying to work from the top down, but you should work from the really simple stuff if you're trying to build your foundational abilities from the bottom up. So turn on a metronome and do permutations of rhythm all across the bar line, all across different areas, like that would be really useful. But then at the same time, it's not one or the other, it's both. Do both, not one or the other. So you do controlled rhythm stuff in a very reduced way, but then also as part of that jam and step outside that form and literally just play rhythms and see what you find. You know, it's expansion, contraction, expansion. Am I going to Genesis? Not yet. Any on PRI? I'm not sure. I don't know that acronym. So maybe if you, it sounds like something rhythm, something. I feel like some people are born with good singing. I mean, I don't really believe that. I feel like some people can come into the world with maybe cognitive development that happened when they were younger that basically preempts them to having a bit more recognition or alignment to the source of what's important about singing, but I don't really think so. I think most people can sing. I'm not really a tabula rasa in the sense that I don't think we necessarily are completely blank slates, because our cognition, we're gaining cognition while we're intrauterine. So literally our environment in the womb literally changes our cognition. And then the very first, weeks of our life and months and years, like that is our sensory motor ground to which the entire rest of our life is going to be built on. So some people in the first 2 years of their life can have more sensory ground where maybe they're more active and they're thinking more about the sound, or that's the sensory mode that they play through the world in and receive object reactions through, or not. And so then that can create a disposition later on. It's like some people come, but anyone can learn singing. It's a talent. Yeah, of course it's a talent. But then of course the way that people are able to recognize what's important or relevant or look in the right place when practicing, that is also coming from the ground. So that's also a talent and a skill, but you can learn that skill. Let's see here. Math is only the explanation. Exactly. It has nothing to do with the actual thing itself. It's simply a form that we describe it with later. February 16th to 18th, I actually might be able to. Let's see. Let me take a look here. You know what? I might be able to get some microtonal piano coming through today. Normally I can't because of how my computer stuff works, but since it's a new computer, I think it allows me to. Actually, yes, I can go to Genesis. I have that week off. I might actually go to Genesis. Where's Genesis at? Is that, is there a, yeah. Some composers do the math first. Well, now we're talking about something different, okay? Then their effect is grounded through the sound. That doesn't mean they're making the work with the intention of a particular auditory object coming back. Formalism, of course, is a valid way to make art and music, but you have to recognize it's detached from the ground. You don't know if it's going to sound cool or not until it then becomes sound again and you hear it, and then you adjust your formalization, right? Like Ioannis Xenakis had really phenomenal quality, and he was primarily a formalist, but his formalism has a phenomenal quality to it because he was taking something he was grounded in, and then he was expanding it across the whole spectrum of the sound and hitting you with new sound masses that you'd never heard before. And then after he did that, he got a very strong intuition. Like, listen to some of his percussion pieces, like Safa, or I guess Safa might not count, but listen to, like, Rebonds. Like, there's rhythm and melody there. He became very musical throughout his interactions with music. It's not like it was just purely him not having any intuitions about sound and trying to do it. The only way you know how the sound sounds is if you hear the sound. And so the formalization can create structures and forms, but then they get pushed into sound, and then that's what the audience experiences. So, for example, someone can have really dazzling formalization that they really think is beautiful in the theory and math alone, but that does not translate at all to what other people are going to experience with it. So now there's a stronger implicate order. Whereas if a person who's composing or writing is connected to the sound the whole way, everybody else has access to the sound. We don't hear things necessarily the same way, but because the ground that they're building out of is based on the sound, the audience connects to it much easier, even if it's like some weird stuff, because it's coming from a person who was listening, and that's what field they were oriented across. So it just depends. You can ground form and then push it through into all kinds of sensory like structures, sure, but that doesn't mean they're going to be coherent or received in alignment with the cultural ground that everyone receives music from. Does that make sense? So yes, of course you can ground in other stuff. You can ground your music purely in a relational logic, or purely in a formal logic, or purely in a spontaneous action environment. But depending on where you ground it from, if it's not grounded in sound, you're always going to have this detachment problem where it's like you don't. And then if you were to be given a musical instrument and they were to say, play what you want, the form that you created, which you were pushing through and having performers read by putting it on the chart, you can't just improvise it. You don't have the musical ability. You have a formal ability which transforms into music when it's performed by musicians. So it's different about people's goals. If you want to make that kind of stuff, that's totally fine. It's beautiful. Some of my favorite music is formalist music. But then at the same time, if you want to have a musical ability, it has to come through the ground of sound. Right? Math can't do that for you. You have to experience it still and organize your experience. I want to jam on piano, but when it comes to reading sheet music, my emotional connection to the piece dies on the spot. I don't read sheet music. I mean, I can analyze. Well, let me say it this way. So my girlfriend, she's a concert violinist, and she's incredibly talented, and she's an incredible reader. She just sight reads everything. And I'm really bad at reading. So whenever we try to read pieces together, well, I'm not bad at reading, but I read in a different way because I read for a different purpose. I read music and I capture the whole structure, the whole logic, the whole note relationships, the rhythmic idea. I capture the idea. I don't capture what's there to be told to play and turn it into a command to play. So if you were to lay like sheet music in front of me on piano and say, play this, I mean, even if you lay like a low grade composition in front of it, it's going to be hard for me at first. I'll have to like really go slow and read each point. But then if you were to lay that thing in front of me and sit at a piano and say, improvise around this, I can read like 4 bars at a time and capture the structure and then improvise around that. So there's different kinds of reading. And, if you have a strong emotional connection to music, then that dies on the spot when you go to read it, because you have to go into this very mechanical, learn point by point what's happening. And the people who then develop that ability, they can bring their emotions straight through the sheet music by reading it, because they bypass the cognitive load that you have to read the stuff and play it. Instead, the cognitive load compresses, there's barely any cognitive load, and then they can focus on expressing themselves while reading. And so, kind of like, for example, if you put a jazz lead sheet in front of me, I can read that and express myself right away. And that's got chord symbols and stuff. But then if I go and I put that in front of a classical musician, tell them to express themselves, they're like, well, there's just a melody, they'll maybe play triads and stuff. That there's different types of reading that occur. And so depending on what your background is and what you want to do with music, ultimately, I would encourage you to practice all types of reading, both big structure, like compositional reading, things like where you read a whole score at once vertically, where you capture it all you get the kind of essence of the work, as opposed to getting note by note what's going on. But then you should also practice the note by note stuff. I didn't practice that enough when I was younger, so I do not have very strong ground in reading note for note when I'm playing sheet music. But if you give me the sheet music as a lead, like a melody line, and then you give me the chords, then I'll turn it into literally infinite amount of music. So yeah, let's see. So there's that. I'm going to catch up on chat, and then I'll scroll up a little bit. Harmonize with the cricket. Cricket's bopping at 400 BPM. Did you count it? Did you click it? I didn't even notice the cricket till you mentioned it. Then there would be a blank slate. I think their point is more that some people have a vocal timbre that's traditionally appreciated in singing. Well, your vocal timbre is not like something you're stuck with. Your vocal timbre is incredibly flexible. There's no innate vocal timbre that you have. There's certain kind of distributions that you might find more easy or less easy, but that's still based on the ground of experience you have. If someone had a certain vocal physiology that would suggest they should be low, but then they spent their entire life vocalizing in a way that was higher, then it would be difficult for them to learn to vocalize low with a good tone, because their ground of experience is modifying. Perception tempers every action you take. And so you can't really take an action that's devoid of perception. It doesn't really make sense. What could even be considered a possible action for you? What could even be something to select for? How you judge its quality, how you react upon after doing it, all of that is grounded through perception. And that's why all actions come through perception. And vice versa, all perception is trained by action. So we're stuck in that sort of tautology. Let's see. Can you show the keyboard? I can't show the keyboard because my camera is it's probably 10 feet away from me or 8 feet away from me. And my keyboard is even lower. So I can't show you the keyboard, unfortunately. It's a Nord Stage 3 though. I don't have my overhead keyboard cam set up because I haven't been streaming. I'll try to get that set up this weekend. I tore it down because I went to a studio in December and recorded on a grand piano, and I recorded some piano tracks. So I need to edit the videos for those. Yeah, the stochastic stuff from Xenakis is incredible. Some of my favorite music ever, to be honest. Unfortunately, a lot of microtonal artists forget about the emotional content and message in the music. I talk about this a lot. I catch flack for talking about this because some people will be like, wow, how dare you punch down on a microtonal artist? Well, okay. No, it's because I'm trying to give a clarion call. The problem is microtonality intonation theory is literally infinite. It is truly in completely infinite space. You get to carve the space however you want. And so what can happen is people can fall in love with that, because there's a lot to fall in love with. There's a lot of incredible sounds, right? But the problem is, because it's so infinite, if you only work in that space, then you're actually preventing your more holistic abilities from forming about what you create, what content, how you actually interact with the art itself and so forth. And that's really what people connect to and what people understand. No one really hears the pitches when they hear music. They just hear the effect that it has on them, And so the way I describe it, I actually described it in a microtonal server the other day about this. I'll just read what I quoted because I think it was a pretty decent way to describe it. It's kind of like if you had pigments, if someone's wanting to come into visual art, essentially, right? They're coming into visual art for a reason. They're inspired by art. They love art. They want to make art. They want to become whatever, a painter, etc., right? They could spend forever. So let's say they learn how to make their own pigments instead of buying pigments at the store, right? Or choosing what pigments their classroom has available. You could spend forever learning how to create different pigments for painting, but painting is way more than selecting pigments and seeing how they mix. But pigment making itself is possible to take as an entire art form. People who do make pigments are artists in their own right, and it's a craft and form in itself. But that's traditionally different than the goal someone comes into when they're inspired and they want to learn how to get into painting. And so if we only focus on like the materials and making and carving and building different, and not actually doing the artistic function, then we're only developing that degree in a small scope. And so it kind of stops the rest of the ability from forming, right? The painter needs to learn lots of different skills, not just making pigments. And that's kind of what happens in microtonality is we get to control our pigments. We get to choose our pitch relationships, which choose what harmonies we have access to and choose all the sort of relations there. But that's not the art thing. It can be, right? That's an art in itself. But generally when people think about, I want to learn to make music or I want to create music I like it's not about just choosing pitches. And so because it's so infinite, people can get trapped in that process and not develop more holistic musical abilities that they need to be developing. Analyzing formalist piece makes me cry. I love it personally. Do you have to be good at math to understand theory of primodality? No. When I discovered the theory of primodality and I sort of codified it, I couldn't even add ratios together or multiply. I have no ground in mathematics. I've studied that now in the last 5 years or so. I've been focusing a lot more on mathematics, and now I do have a decent ground. I'm still not like a well-grounded person in mathematics, but I understand it. And I studied a lot of formal logic stuff at this point, and also like modal logic, just different forms of logic. And then that gave me more understanding of like math as a formal object. And I started studying like Euclidean geometry and just a lot of different stuff. So I feel like I'm okay with math now. I understand all the basic maths that I would need for like microtonality at this point, other than some of the like whatever the stuff happens in temperament theory where they do like the vector geometry or linear or multilinear algebra. I don't know how to do that shit. I probably don't. I mean, I want to eventually learn it. I'm developing and practicing math regularly throughout the week, but no, I failed algebra 1 like twice in high school, and then I didn't even get into calculus when I was in high school. I rediscovered integrals on my own, okay? I didn't know what an integral was, but of course, working around the harmonic series, working around infinite ideas, I was like, okay, maybe there's a way to represent this like infinity that like is actually one thing, but represents all the whole set. So, no, you don't have to know math in order to understand primodality. It's just to describe it as a formal object. It's easiest to describe as math. But for me, when I describe it as numbers or math, I'm not talking about the numbers or the math. I'm talking about the sound. When you talk about the 11th harmonic, for me, that excites an entire embodied cognition around what the 11th harmonic sounds like, as an actual harmonic, but then also what the 11th mode sounds like in the harmonic series, and also its second octave and the objects and experience I have with it. It has nothing to do with math for me at all. It is entirely something to do with sound, and the math is just a formal way to point to the patterns of objects that are relevant to being interacted with. So I hope that helps you. No, it's not about, for me, primodality has very little to do with math. I can describe it as such, and that's good, because then people can understand it without having to go through the process of doing the sound a bunch. But if they understand the formal notion of it, that doesn't mean they understand the essence and content of what it is. So it's a catch-22 both ways. Really like that explanation. Cool. Sheet music is certified cringe shit. Real improv. Yeah, no. Being able to read music in a fluent way is a huge ability that opens up a lot of capacity, but at the same time I find it kind of locks down capacity, because then people really want there to be a defined thing that they're supposed to play, whereas like when you improvise and you build it from the ground up like that, where you're just playing what you want, it just gives you this endless ability to not have any instructions at all and to just touch the instrument like where you're not even focused on it, Hi there, short fat otaku. It's going great, thank you. Jazz still uses sheet music, yeah, of course. Big bands especially like read note for note on sheet music, and then jazz combos and stuff, or small groups, or even soloists, they tend to read off lead sheets, not so much exact sheet music. But the more people you have in an ensemble, the more precise everything needs to be defined. So then the more, the bigger the band gets, the more people need to specifically read in order to keep it together and to reduce rehearsal time. But then if you have a small combo, a 3-piece, 4-piece, 5-piece, 6-piece, whatever, give them the lead sheet, give them some chords, give them the lines, and they'll figure it out, right? That's So I like that stuff a lot. When I learn I might play on the Lumitone. I do have the Lumitone set up right here. Oh, can you all hear that? Oh, it's already, wow, okay. That's not the thing that I wanted here. That's going to switch over to my second screen. Like I said, I've got this set up so that I can do stuff musically here. So let me switch this. I also did a really cool jam the other day in 24 equal. Sorry, you're going to see this EQ for a moment while I open up some other software, and then I'll tab back into my camera. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, it was such a hassle reinstalling all my audio programs. It literally took me like 3 weeks to do it, and it was just it was not the funnest experience of life. I'll just say that much. It took me forever, and I'm only just now getting through it. Hold on, that's not what I wanted. Yes, I think it actually is. But then switch it into 31, and then get rid of this EQ here. I was demonstrating with my voice students today how, very briefly, for like 2 seconds before we go and take action, the problem with hearing resonance and understanding resonance is that the human ear doesn't really have a prime for hearing resonance, like perceptually. Instead, the behaviors of resonance automatically get bussed down into, at least with voice, they automatically get bussed down into vowelness. So if I take some random collection of resonances, put it on a spectrum and shift it around, the ear will pop out and create order of different vowels as it slides across. And that tricks a lot of people because they think there's like something in the world called resonance that they need to hear. When in reality, like they already hear it. In fact, they hear it so well, they don't hear it because it's so intuitive for them to receive essentially. So it's kind of a tricky thing. Can you all hear that? Okay, now let me come back to this here. There we go. I'm back. Hello. I really like that explanation. Okay, I already said that. Crazy kid, blah, blah, blah. Consonant, if the consonant is sweet. If consonant is sweet, I don't know what you mean, then dissonance is sour, bitter. I don't think consonant's sweet. Actually, I think there's quite a difference between concordance and discordance and consonant and dissonance. There can be discordance, which is sweet. There can also be consonance, which is acrid, or I should say concordance, which is dissonant. You can have dissonant concordance, or you can have consonant discordance. Both of those are possible. So when I think about like a major 7 chord and 12 equal, it's kind of a discordance, but it's consonant and it's sweet. But in terms of it's not that discordant. I mean, I'm kind of being a little facetious in this context particularly, but for example, the major like hexatonic thing, it's pretty discordant in 12 equal, quite discordant, but it's also sweet and consonant relative to the other objects that exist in 12. So it's kind of that. Perception tempers every action you take is dope as hell. Indeed, it's a total fact as well. Try to find anything that you've ever done that hasn't been informed by perception throughout it. You just can't. And your perceptions are being formed before you're even born, and that's important to recognize. Let's see. I think you have to have a somewhat mathematically inclined mind to be proficient with music theory. I would separate mathematical inclined mind from a systems-oriented mind. Mathematics is a very particular construction of systems and of objects. So I would agree with you that for my entire life since I was a child, I've been very fascinated with complex systems, dynamic systems, things connecting to things and making a bigger thing. Like, I've loved that my whole life. I mean, that's what composition tends to be. It's about like creating wholes out of parts. And so I'm obsessed with systems. I always have been obsessed with systems. I've always been into that. But you have to recognize that that's not what math is. Math is a particular system that's been created. And so math is like a child of logic. And so I love logic. I love reason. I've always been a very logical thinker, very intuitive and perceptive along my logical inferences around the world. But I've loved complex systems the most. And math describes those, but math is not those. Okay, that's important to recognize, because the way that we teach math, we kind of teach it as if it's like in an ivory tower of the fact that it can prove things. But the only reason it can prove things is because we presuppose the axiom for the law of identity. When in reality out in the world, like, no one thing is identical to another one thing. Everything's a little different. Even the spatial position of something is different. When we allow the rounding errors of real complex world to go away, and we describe it as A equals A or 1 equals 1, now we have a presupposition that this 1 means 1. 1 what? 1, of course, it's recursive. So no, I mean, I don't think that math is necessarily the highest form of logic. Quite the opposite. Math is a sort of system that's been generated from logic, and logic is more the parent, but also logic, I feel, is emergent out of complex systems because we're a complex system. So humans create logic, and then we use that logic to create rule sets so that we can have deductive order. Then we go and do stuff in that deductive order and end up with proofs that seem like they're true, certainly true within themselves. In fact, atemporally true and necessarily true because of the rules that we predefined to play in. But in reality, there's not like rules out here. Like there's like ways that things happen, right? I can't like cheat the world and like fly with my arms or anything. So you could say that's a rule, but that's not really a rule, right? I could describe it and then give it a rule. And then now we can say, yes, of course that rule is necessarily true, but it's not necessarily true. Because what if I, had like helium bags on my back, and then I also had slight big fans on my arms, and I could probably catch some air. It's not exactly true. Nothing is necessarily true out in the real world. It's always contingently true because it's our perception that creates order out of what we're experiencing. And then that perception is always contingent. It's contingent on the ground. It's contingent on our faculties for perception, which then inform our faculties for understanding logic. And that has a big issue when it comes to coherency, because what could be reasonable and what could be coherent is not necessarily what is true, right? That's what's reasonable and coherent and true relative to what we can comprehend for coherency. If we were probably 10,000 times larger, like that's the scale we lived on, our inferences about the world would be very different. The way we would interact, the way we would draw objects and boundaries. We wouldn't say there's the ocean and the sand, and then there's this there's this seashell on the beach. No, we'd say there's this little ball of blueness that's out there, right? We would literally sample the world differently. And the way that we would sample it means that we would boundary it differently. The object selections we would select would be different, which means now the causal relations between the objects are different. It's just, so no, I wouldn't say you have to have good math to be music theory related. I think you have to have good systems minded thinking and good logic, but that's, I think, mostly trainable. I think there is, obviously some of it's couched in G factor intelligence, which apparently has less moldability than other forms of intelligence. So I do think if you have like higher G factor intelligence, music theory is a little bit easier, but I think that doesn't really matter because someone could have like higher G factor intelligence and then also work in music theory and they could have high G factor intelligence but never really ground the music theory into something that's meaningful. And then someone who maybe has lower G factor intelligence works really hard in music theory but then also grounds it on the instrument, and then that music theory does something for them that's really profound and pragmatically applied that does cool effects. So I don't think music theory is that mathy, really. I mean, it's very logical and structural, and so that has an isomorphism to math, or a sort of cross relation to math, but it's because it's what's above math. It's structure and logic, which is what ultimately generates math. But only once you take the axioms that math presupposes, laws of identity, distribution, association, all these things, and then when you go out in the world, those things don't necessarily work like that. You can observe the phenomena and then use the inferences of math and the axioms of math to identify like structures that seem like they're probabilistically closed loop systems, like in physics, where we say we're sampling this super complex phenomena that's actually invisible, we can't even see it. We sample it and it looks like these closed fact statements emerge to be true consistently enough to where we can say it's true. And then now we have this sort of grounding of empiricism that's now described through formalism. But that doesn't make it math. That's not the math. That's the phenomena is happening, and we found a description of it which is coherent enough and consistent enough to be applied there, which then allows us to interact with it in a predictive way. But the reality is, problem of induction, there's no guarantee that that rule stays like that forever. So it's not like it's an indelible law of everything possible. It just happens to be a closed fact statement that we found about a complex phenomenon, once again using perception. Otherwise we never would have investigated that in the first place. So it's all still couched through perception. So hopefully that explains a little bit. Shout out to Kripke. Yeah, Kripke frames are pretty cool. I studied those. I'm more interested in sort of like pragmatic modal logic, but I do like the Kripke frames, and I do like the formalized modal logic as well. Let's see. People overrate how much math you need for discrete mathematics. Find a PDF of Coleman's discrete mathematical structures and you can get through it. Yeah, right. Math is not like, I don't know, as long as you have logic, then you can figure out math, because it's literally all it is. And then it's logic with a certain rule set that has to be played and followed through. Lovely. So yeah, I want to play some music. I will in a moment. Don't tell me what to do. I'm having a fun time chatting. I'm doing whatever I want right now, but I will play. Do you skew towards more romanticist than enlightenment modes of thinking? I don't, neither. I'm more of an integrationist or an I don't even know. I have my own metaphysics, right? I've been developing, actually since November, I spent literally all of November working like 8 to 10 hours a day on my metaphysical formalizations and metaphysical system, which then has grounded my teaching and my music theory. And now I'm applying all that stuff back into the thing. Can you all hear this, by the way? I'm putting the piano away and bringing the Lumitone over here. You might actually be able to see it. Hold on. Let me move this. Whoops. I don't think you can see it. But this has a sus pedal. My piano didn't have the sus pedal plugged in. Hold on. I'm dropping things. Let's see here. Who do you main in Melee? Falco. I'm a bird. I've always... I was a Fox main on 64. And then I fell in love with Falco. Okay, there we go. And then I'll grab this here. Perfect, okay. Can you hear this? Okay, perfect. I just feel Doc is better. I don't like Doc at all. Does a sus pedal turn more notes into sus chords? No. A sus pedal just allows you to sustain the pitches without having to hold them. So this piano doesn't have a sustain pedal plugged into it right now because it's plugged into my Lumitone. So that was the last thing I was playing. Is there such thing as a musical contradiction? That depends. There's logical musical contradictions, but the ear makes order and puts it in a category. There are, a sound that is both silent and not silent. But then that is clearly the ear is going to hear it and order it. So the ear kind of always hears categories and perception. I can think of musical contradictions. Maybe how about the shepherd's tone? The infinitely changing, infinitely falling tone or whatever. I was actually playing on the Pulsar 23 around Christmas. I had it out around Christmas. Actually, it's right behind me too, but and I figured out how to make a shepherd's tone on a Pulsar, which is just like mind-blowing. So I didn't know you could do that on a Pulsar, but yeah, it was really cool. That's kind of a contradiction, but it's not even really a contradiction because the ear, once again, orders it. The ear is going to make sense of whatever it's shown. Not sense as in like, oh, that's very logical and makes sense, but you can experience it. The fact that you can experience a sound means that like it's been bussed into experience that's unified and integrated around what you've experienced. Let's see. You have a Pulsar in your house? I have 2 Pulsars in my... Oh, good joke. Yes. A Pulsar 23 is what I have. Sound quite a lot. Metaphysical conception kicking up there. Can you share a little on your concept? It's not exactly a concept. It's sort of a lot of concepts. It's one concept and many concepts and many practical things and many things. Creating that's like the biggest question. I could talk about that for a couple hours. So I may save that for another time, because I'm going to be making videos and releasing it in text and stuff, and I have a lot of it written, and I'm probably going to be posting it in my music server soon. I've posted some of it in other servers that I've argued with people in, just so I can have like a real dialectic with someone arguing and who's trying to think that I'm wrong. Because I like to learn. I learn from argumentation. So argumentation is probably my favorite thing to learn through. And I tend to be a lot more productive in writing when I'm arguing, as opposed to when I'm like sitting by myself trying to put it in the right words. What's the point of metaphysics from the perspective of an empiricist? That's a super loaded question. Empiricism is metaphysics. Necessarily so. Right? Empiricism is a type of metaphysical category and alignment, basically. I mean, I guess you're right, yeah. There's not really a difference. I mean, for me, what I observe empirically when I'm interacting with people, because I'm a pragmatist fundamentally, my own thing or whatever, but I'm generally a pragmatist. So I would consider myself a modalist. So I have multiple levels in what I view. So if you want me to conjecture about what I think the fundamental nature of all things outside of humans are, then I can do that. I can make that conjecture, but I always couch it in speculation. And then the next level down, I can make another closer speculation that's kind of close to what we have, but then extending. But then when we get to a sort of more modal level, then it's like, I'll tell you what I know to be based on my experiences relative to what I have observed. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily the indelible truth of the universe, but it's contingent. It's necessarily contingent on experience, of course. But then in that process, throughout teaching for many, many years, I've found that most of the reasons why people get stuck when they try to learn stuff is that we don't have in society very good metaphysics that support people's ability to learn. We basically like talk in notions to try to teach people things, and then the notions, because of the perceptual principles, are multi-stable structures. It's not one thing or another necessarily, it's lots. And not only that, but then what we interact with, like, we have no way to communicate about the grounds that people have in a way that is like even constructive. And so I've been doing a lot of that and building that over years and years at this point. And part of it, I mean, I could argue about this. I could talk about this, but I don't really want to get into it because I'll just spend the whole time talking about it, and I've gotten into it enough in many places. But well, no, see, Joseph Noss, empiricism has to do with knowledge, not really related to metaphysics. And all knowledge is contingent on metaphysics. How you parse the knowledge, what you believe to be adequate knowledge, how you believe empiricism to be valid, what you consider knowledge to be defined as, what knowledge even holds up, that's all metaphysical inquiry past that point. Your knowledge about estimating and conjecturing about how knowledge is acquired and the knowledge of knowledge as itself, that is metaphysical, absolutely. It's beyond empirical inference. I mean, you can have like scaled inference to where it's like, okay, you're trying to couch it, but the problem, Munchausen's trilemma shows us and makes the argument that we can only really have three paths of justification for anything, either the circular argument, the infinite regress, or the dogmatic argument. And so no, empiricism is necessarily metaphysically implicated and not sound within itself. Knowledge is necessarily metaphysical. Yeah, exactly. Even pure monist material. Thank you, ADL. Exactly. Because literally, let's say you're trying to be an empiricist and you don't think that there's some metaphysical claim you're making. No, because you're trusting what your own perception is coming back. And then you're even trusting not just that, but then the inductive reasoning, which builds on abductive reasoning. You start from the abductive position, then you make inferences, then you make a deductive case, then you test it in the inductive case. And so this still implicates a lot of different metaphysical problems. One of which being empiricism is literally an auto-recursive, auto-empirical argument. I think, therefore I am is literally the ground of empiricism. You trust the experience of what you've had and what you know to be the case based on what you've had. And you go, okay, well, why do you trust that? Well, then you're back to a circular argument. I think, therefore I am is circular. Ergo is circular. So it's like, well, I am because I think, therefore I am, and that's why I trust my empiricism because I know what I see is that, but then it's not actually certain. There is no guarantee there in ergo, even though it's obviously, the base argument that I will take, but it is a circular argument, and it's necessarily circular. There is no way out of that, and that circularity then implicates metaphysics, because now you're basically literally saying, Hume's problem of induction, covers it. I don't want to rehash the problem of induction, which ultimately calls into question all of empiricism. But then again, I don't really think rationalism is any better, because rationalism as well, once again, is based through abduction to start. So you are necessarily, again, trusting your inference about what what is reasonable relative to your perceptual capacities, which then even testing in a rational sense, empiricism, or even testing in a rational sense what sounds to be true necessarily so in the formal structures you build, is still a form of empiricism. It's just it's further up the scale. It kind of works the opposite. You deduce, then you test the cases in the abductive, then you build towards the inductive point, as opposed to abduction pushing towards deduction, or abduction, which takes you to deduction, then you test through induction, or induction, which does the opposite, where you have the induction, so then you observe, then you deduce, then you go and test in abduction again. They're different forms. You should read Charles Sanders Peirce if you're interested in the sort of all three of them in relation to each other. But nonetheless, no knowledge is certain. Literally not a single piece of knowledge is certain. Even that you are, the only sort of irreducible knowledge that you and I have access to is that we are is the experience itself in itself. So like pure awareness, as we'll often see it referenced around in different spaces, but that's the only thing that we have as total certainty. But even that's not totally certain, but it's irreducible in itself. So, all experience is grounded through the capacity to have experience or awareness. Fundamentally, you can't go any lower than that bottom turtle there. Yeah. So no, empiricism is definitely a metaphysical position. I mean, I think they're all important. That's part of what metaphysics is. I don't think it's one or the other or this or that, but all of them necessarily are their own unique metaphysical categories that manifest from our limited ways we can interact with the world. And then not just that, but the perceptual principles that all humans are subject to. And that informs and creates all kinds of patterns that show up in our reasoning, shows up in our system building, shows up in our inquiry of the world, shows up in our language, shows up in our arguments. So my system is sort of starts there, but then of course I can conjecture above that. But what I know to be most strong to infer around is how perception works. And based on understanding how perception works, then you see a lot of patterns that crop up cross-culturally, across, thousands of years of stuff, and so forth. I'm not even sure any noumenons work. I don't really know if I believe in the thing in itself. I mean, I do in a way, but I can't know it. So, I think the thing in itself, now we're getting into the speculatory area. So, yeah, musical noumenons exist, no, but your selection, your irreducible thisness of that thing you hear, that is a sort of form of your own noumenon connecting with a thing, or, your own irreducible thisness, which is that, right? If you point to a thing and say, you see that? That empty word is a perception word that's boxing what quality you've indicated towards. And no one can see exactly the way that you boxed it or know what it means, because your ground is different. And so the way it associates into the ground is different. Yes, the word is consistent. I can say, that vase. Okay, we can be on the same page about that. I trust from the cultural ground, the vase, but it doesn't mean you know exactly what the vase means to me, or even what it conjured, or how it reacted, or how I perceived it, or how I selected it, or where I went to. You don't know any of those things when I talk about the words. And that's what I'm talking about, what interests me so much about metaphysics is not just metaphysics. It's not metaphysics, that's just a word we call it. But what interests me about trying to understand pragmatically, like the sort of different problems in learning, because so much of learning is like someone wants a new skill, right? And then they think that skill comes from the description, or a certain lesson, or a certain thing they need to do. But the problem is, thingness is only capable for the agent. There's no thingness that we all are agreeing on. We can map a thingness with a word that makes it relatively valuable as an index to point to, and consistent in mapping out to the world. But the thisness of that you select is completely different. And so when someone wants a skill, it has to come through their own perception. And then perception tempers action so that they can actually achieve the thing they want by having the top-down agency. This is all very solipsistic. I completely disagree with that. There's nothing solipsistic about it, because I also entertain that there is a intersubjective world, which we call this interactive world between us, that we can point to. There's nothing solipsistic about it at all. So you're trying to pin me down in one position or another, and what I'm telling you is that we hold multiple positions, necessarily so, because literally there are forms of knowledge in the world that don't fit into any singular category, or don't fit into a category of not being solipsistic. If you want to gain an ability, it literally has to come from your own agency and your own perceptual ground that informs and tempers your own action. Skill is solipsism, but not solipsism because you have the material coming back that feeds into it. And so it's not about the object or the subject, it's about the ambiject. And only the subject has access to their own ambiject. It is literally not solipsistic at all. Maybe one mode of it might be considered solipsistic from your perspective, but no, of course not, because it actually changes action. It's not an empty notion. It's not an empty reflection. It's an interactiveness in the world. And we see that all the time. knowledge that you gain from literally the experience itself is irreducible. I'll just make the basic knowledge argument, right? Mary's in a room. She can't see colors. She's in a black and white room forever. She knows every single fact statement about all colors possible. She thinks about color constantly, but she can't see it anywhere, right? And then suddenly the door opens to the outside and she can have access to the color. Does she learn new knowledge? Intuition says, yes, definitely it does, right? And when that occurs, then we have a type of knowledge that's irreducible from experience. You can make every fact statement, every objective inference about a physical system, but unless you understand how that experience is to you, then those fact statements do nothing. You could sit there and tell me all day about, here's this formalization of tennis, here's all these equations, here's how the strike is supposed to work, but literally unless I go onto the court and take actions and build my perceptions on the court, your fact statements are not teaching me any abilities. They can, if I already have ability and then you tell me a fact statement, I can incorporate that into my ability, but that's not what gave me the ability in the first place. So no, it's not solipsistic at all. It's just a fundamental truth of how we all learn. We can only learn based on our perceptual ground against the actions that we take, Yeah. It's very, very clear. So for example, let's say that you're trying to do ear training, right? And you never hear, and you're just told the structures and logic. There are true fact statements about that thing, but unless you've experienced those, you're not going to hear it. It's a completely different form of knowledge. And also me telling you what it sounds like is not you hearing it. There's an irreducible experience of knowledge that you have to get in order to control through abilities. And if you don't have any abilities that are grounded in like sense knowledge and motor knowledge, then that won't be obvious. But if you actually work with people and develop sensory motor knowledge with people in skills that require that, it's very obvious. It has to come from their own agency, and you can help ground them, which is what you're talking about. It's not solipsistic at all, because I can experience a thing and then I can have them point to it in their natural, we can put it out between us. They can talk about it in their natural language, which is them selecting it with a grounded association body of content, that they have actual words that mean something based on their past experiences, and then they select it for me, and then I get to look at their selection and judge it and evaluate and go, I think you're selecting this wrong here. I don't think you're looking at the right thing. I would describe it this way, and they can describe it another, and then we can have that grounded content between us. It's not purely in both of our grounds, but it's now in this sort of interstitial ground between us, and then that allows us to actually have feedback around an ability that's meaningful for a student. So no, it's not solipsistic at all. I think that you're just quick to jump to conclusions because, of course, you are. That's what perception does. It jumps to conclusions. One of the most fundamental principles of perception, other than how similarity and difference creates an inference of closure, that's the third principle, and then those objects of closure, then what they end up doing is creating the figure ground extension, the emergence off the figure ground. That's what you do. You have a couple things in front of you, you boundary them up, you had an idea of what you think, I believe, that turns into a figure, so you lose the rest of the ground in the experience. Just like if I select this note here, that becomes the focal point, and if there was something hidden in the background of my room, you're not going to notice that anymore, or hidden in the background of your room, you won't notice it anymore, unless, of course, you step back from the perception, you integrate both of them. There's all sorts of cases where if I were to, for example, draw, I could demonstrate it very clearly, but we need all sorts of, there's more than one category of knowledge. No, you're wrong. See, Harrison, you're trying to understand the proof of existence. I'm not interested in that. I'm a pragmatist. I mean, I am interested in the true fundamentals of all or whatever, but that's always going to be based in speculation. There's nothing there that you can prove outside of perception. Every single experience, every inference, every claim, every argument, every belief, every action that has ever been taken by a human being is necessarily tempered by perception. So you're just banging into the wall of the circular tautology of perception again necessarily. So I don't even want to play that game when I'm working in something that's about pragmatism. I'm interested in what gets results. And what gets results, it's not about trying to figure out what's the truest thing you hear out there. No, it's building your experience and mapping that experience in a way that's relevant for you so that you can take that knowledge. I usually have a hand cam, but it's not set up right now. Maths only allows us to quantify, predict objects that are predefined by perception. Exactly. Yes, there's not like there's the object out there. We form the objects through how we perceive. And we perceive in pretty similar ways, which allow us to form similarly strong inferences about objects. We also share a presupposed cultural ground, which is gained through enacted, embodied action in the world as a child. So yeah, our language is pretty damn good at mapping. When I point back there, I know that you think that's a tree. I know that you see that as a keyboard. I know you see this as a hand. That's not what's in dispute. That's not disputed at all. But then what happens when you leave the ground that culture gave you and you're listening to something like music that's invisible and mostly formless? How do you learn that? Well, not through any predefined box or patterning or quality. You have to actually work and embed and recognize that, select it properly, map it properly, now do something with it and you use it so that you gain enacted knowledge, which grounds the concept. Then you can re-simulate what it actually means later with the notion, which is a representative symbol. Specified. Let's see. I understood perception being the most certain sort of thing being solipsism. Well, I mean, once again, even the notion solipsism is a category of stuff that you put in your perception. So there's a whole bunch of claims or whatever, things that fall a certain way or not a certain way. And then essentially, if right now they're falling in a certain category for you that you would call solipsism, then you call it solipsism, and that's solipsism. It's not like there's like an absolute solipsism that exists, or even the notion solipsism is anything more than a sort of boundary that's been created for certain thought patterns, which can then get placed inside that category. Same with categorical perception overall. Same with the vowels that I speak and such, How you make metaphysics the ground for all empiricism. I mean, it literally is. Because there's not only empiricism. Some people would say that empiricism's not so good. Look at Karl Popper's work. He's not an empiricist. He's like an anti-empiricist. He's like a falsification empiricist who considers himself to be almost a rationalist exclusively. It is necessarily empirical. Yeah, thank you, Luciano. Exactly. It is necessarily metaphysical. There's lots of other positions that exist beyond solipsism and empiricism. If anything, you could argue that empiricism in a way is a solipsism, because you're trusting only what you can infer to recognize as true. And then you say, well, how do you know it's true based on what you experienced? Well, because I experienced it. It's recursive. It's dependent on the fact that you experience. So you end up back in a circular loop, and then you take the first horn of the trilemma of Munchausen's trilemma. You take the circular horn. It's not at all not metaphysical. Yes. Okay. Let's see, I perceive contour to be relevant to the phenomenon of consonance. I agree very much as well. I mean, I think when you talk about consonance and dissonance, that's different than discordance and concordance. I think basically everything is relevant to consonance and dissonance, including the timing of the thing, the stressing of the thing, the dynamics of the thing, the timbre of the instruments playing the thing, the actual pitch relations of the thing, where you're at in the form and the context. All of that is relevant to consonance and dissonance. Consonance and dissonance is a very contextual description. Concordance and discordance we can talk about more in a how does the thing hit? Is it rough and smooth, right? Is it clean or pure and clear or dirty? That's not dissonance and consonance. That tends to be more concordance and discordance. So we would only say something exists if we observe it. I mean, it depends on what your metaphysics are. I mean, that would be like one aspect of where I would maybe, but no, I don't only think that. Once again, we have a lot of different ways to think about the world, and I'm a big fan of combining them all and integrating them into something that works in multiple modes of inference and multiple modes of a skill development, because we have lots of spaces where skill development progresses across a thing. I also wouldn't really say relative. I mean, there's a aspect of things that are relative, but then of things that kind of aren't, right? So for example, once something's grounded intersubjectively between people, it's not relative anymore. If I say like 1 + 1 = 2, that's not relative anymore. That's pretty absolute if you accept the axioms that I've defined. But then if I were to change the axioms and say 1 = 5, now suddenly 1 + 1 = 10. So it just depends. Once again, it's modal. See, everyone's tripping over themselves because they're trying to get it all to be one thing, but it is one thing, but that's why it's not any of those things. The one thing is not reducible. It's just it's a monad, as some people might say. And then because of that, everything is necessarily dependent on everything else to be necessarily contingent. Dependent origination creates a problem where nothing in itself has some permanent self-nature. So then it's like, well, everything's kind of empty, but nothing's empty. The reason why everything's kind of empty is because everything is kind of everything simultaneously, or dependent on everything to even come to be. So then you end up looking for the inside of the thing that's fundamental. And I have a theory of musical monads. I mean, you couldn't have it. I personally couldn't have any theory without starting from a monad. So I don't know, that'd be for me like the first pure experience is a monad in itself, basically. That's why no one else can have access to it. And if we try to describe it or map it out to the world, there's lossiness happening there because experience itself is an irreducible monad. But then also, I would argue even further, depending on if we want to go kind of more skeptical, we could take the Advaita principles here. And I would tend to say that's a bit more what I feel more comfortable estimating about the broader universe in itself. But no, there's this concept of when you look at the flower, like the flower has the water in it, the flower has the sun in it, even though the sun is not there. When you look at the flower, it depends on it to originate and to come into existence, and necessarily carries the relationships and the effects and the integration and embeddedness in the world to it. And that's why things tend to be so infinite and everything tends to be kind of one thing. I think that monads can be perceived. Well, I mean, every perception you have is a monad. Yeah, literally that's like the first rule of perception. The figure ground principle is literally we only perceive wholes. Even when you perceive a part, you're perceiving that part now as a whole. And then when you combine a whole bunch of parts, then it's like that's a new whole. If you look at a horizon off at a sunset, you don't see all the individual trees. You take it in as literally one whole perception. All perception is a whole monad. That's like a fundamental principle that Gestalt theorists discussed empirically and demonstrated long times ago. So yeah, I agree with you there. You can't really talk about perception without invoking the problem of the monad to begin with. Would you say the laws of thought are the part of perception? I would say the opposite. I would say that all thought occurs through perception. So it's kind of the opposite. I don't think there's necessarily laws of thought, but there's principles of perception, and the content you have changes how you perceive, but then you can only think in a way that you could perceive. You can't really think outside of perception. That doesn't even really make sense. I think the emptiness idea comes from the fact that rationalism is inherently dependent on assumptions. I don't think that... Oh, I see what you're talking about. No, we're talking about different kinds of emptiness. I mean fundamental emptiness, not emptiness in the notion. I agree with that, though. Formalism's empty. Actually, there's this really good book by Peter Unger called Empty Ideas. It's a critique of... It's a critique of modern analytic philosophy. I do like analytic philosophy, so don't think I'm a hater or anything, but it's pretty empty. It's not really talking about stuff. It's not really trying to like actually talk about like concrete meaning in the world or something, or have any pragmatic impact, really. It's really more so like formalizing arguments and then bringing the arguments out. My minor's in philosophy, and then I've just always been a very philosophically driven thinker. I don't really separate philosophy from the practice. Like, I try to understand what I'm doing, and I try to teach people, and my job is teaching people pretty much my whole life, teaching people skills that are kind of hard to learn. So it kind of has necessarily ended up pointing more towards philosophy. But it was my minor, and I have a whole library, in the other room of different philosophy, and not just that, but music, texts, and I try to read all sorts of things. But I think that if philosophy is divorced from some real-life practice, then it's kind of empty in itself. It's got to come from like real inquiry into the world, trying to understand or do things, analytic philosophy has been on a huge downturn. Yeah, I mean, it's I have a love and hate relationship with it. I like arguments to be clear. I appreciate a very clear argument, but at the same time, if you think you're going to try to formalize everything and figure out the world that way, you're wrong, because perception you're still operating through, and your perceptual categories literally change based on the context. So you can't get context out of it, which is why it's like you necessarily have to think modally in order to get to you have to think modally in order to even get towards anything that can apply anywhere, because application itself is modal. What genre is soft music? I don't really think genres. I just play notes and play what I feel. I mean, if you consider it like jazz, I don't know. I mean, but I wouldn't really, it didn't really sound too jazz, like bebop-y or anything. It's just kind of my soul music. It's just what comes out when I'm vibing. You've been reading Husserl? No, I already read everything Husserl wrote. I would say he's okay. I would say not exactly my prominent source on anything. I think there's other people who did perception a little better. But I can give you some Husserlian recommendations. You've been trying to return to read Heidegger, but you've been return. Heidegger's cool. You kind of give him phenomenology. So that's the thing. I don't really think of it as separate, because all empirical inquiry starts with phenomenology, and then all deductive inquiry also starts with phenomenology. There's no non-phenomenological inquiry that occurs, because you're always in phenomena. You have no off button. So I wouldn't really agree with the Husserlian approach necessarily of trying to get that in itself necessarily. But I like, he obviously sparked a lot of that inquiry. I have not read any Dostoevsky yet. A lot of people have recommended some or whatever. I have not read a single word of it. Opinions on Baruch Spinoza, clueless. I mean, not clueless. I actually think he has some okay ideas, but nominalism is like one of the most least impactful things that can possibly be. Like if you take the law of identity that strongly, then nothing even really does anything at that point. If a necessary truth is like necessary even outside of perception, then you've basically like succumbed to this like problem of reverse solipsism, where it's like the total opposite of like there being that inference problem. So I don't know. I mean, I do like Spinoza's sort of monadic thing. I do like his idea of the sort of like it's all, an infinite essence essentially, and that God as a symbol represents the infinite essence. I generally tend to agree with that, but I approach that more in a non-dual way, and not just a non-dual way, but then not just taking what's necessary as what's indelible forever, because what's necessary to us. We are always modally contingent on the fact that we're a thinking being. We have certain capacities, we have certain abilities. We exist on a certain planet. We're the emergent product of literally an embedded, integrated chain of life and a chain of evolution that's occurred for like ever. At least that's what our empirical evidence suggests, which would be like, less than half of the cells in your body are even human. Am I a Buddhist? No. I have my own religion, or spiritual practice, I guess. But I would say I align very closely to Buddhism, but Buddhism is a little too agnostic for me. I am a bit more close to Advaita Vedanta, but also then my own particular way of thinking about the world. I first unlocked, I guess, a connection to God. I tend to hesitate to even use that word because it's so loaded with an inference of like a patriarch, whatever, like a daddy figure in the sky that's like a clear thinking being that's organizing the world. But more so like I first kind of gained my spiritual connection to everything. That's what I tend to think of God as, like everything. But I tend to gain my spiritual connection at first through music, actually through the Harmonic series. So that's, if you've ever seen my pages, I'll describe maybe I'm a harmonic mystic, and a lot of my work has like sort of spiritual undertones through it. It's because music is what unlocked the experience of like transcendence for me, and then that allowed me to then transport that into other domains and understand other things. And there's a lot of support for that in older cultures too, about how music is like the fastest way to obtain spirituality. There's actually a Sufi quote that's pretty cool about like music, song, then performance, and then dance are like the closest ways to unlock spirituality in someone that doesn't have it or whatever, if they really get lost in it. And my inference of that is just because what allows you to experience everything as like a transcendental process is when your identity melts away. When your identity melts away and it quits, you bypass the object-subject problem. And this comes back to perception. So we have the figure-ground principle, which always chooses one thing at the expense of all other possible things. So like the thing emerges from all the not thing. When you select an object, you're selecting that one, not everything else. You've inferred that there's a boundary there that you've picked up, and that boundary you're implying is true. And my argument, I would argue this a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I would say like all is statements are internally pre-accepted ought statements. So when you say like, this is a bottle, what you're really saying is this, like before like early in perception, you're saying this ought be this form, and now it's called bottle, and you've accepted that claim, and now the ought is concluded. So I think a lot of the is-ought gap that forms is actually forming because the ought comes first and the is comes after. And the ought is like an inquiry, like this ought be this way, and then it's like it fills in. And then it turns into an is statement after it's concluded, which is what the problem with formalism is that it's concluded. It's atemporal. It's persistent, But yet being is never persistent. Being is not atemporal. Being is happening and unfolding through time always. But there doesn't need to be an is before the ought. Well, certainly there does. There doesn't need to be an is before the ought. Well, no, the is your selection. When you take the boundary, you have you select it as a form, and then you quite, is that, ought be that? Yes, it is that, essentially. You end up in this sort of, but since it happens eternally and it happens automatically and nearly instantly, we don't really notice that we don't tend to suspend belief about our selections. Boundaries are not real. Like, what is a real boundary? If you zoom out to a giant scale, what we would see boundaries to be from our perspective is very different. If you zoom into a microscopic scale, boundaries are now very different. If you zoom into a quantum scale, boundaries are not, right? There's not really, there's just sort of energy boundaries based on what probabilistic distributions occurring in that moment, but boundaries are not like a real thing. That everything is kind of one integrated phenomena, and everything relies on everything else to spin and stand out of the phenomena. So when you select a thing, you're selecting at the extent of all the not things that you're also selecting. And so that's the figure ground principle. And then to apply this to what we were talking about prior of transcendence, if you're making music, if you're focused on yourself as the subject, trying to think what comes next, what should I do? You're not doing the thing. You're not in the space. That can kind of work, but you're now focused on the subject. There's the object there, and then you're putting your attention in the subject related to the object. Or it's also not, you only listen to the music and you sit there and you think about the music. You don't want to be thinking about the music, really. Now you're focused too heavily into the object. What you want is the integration and a fusion of them. So there's not a thing anymore. It's not this thing or that thing. It's neither things. And so things go away, and then it returns into this sort of flow state is what the flow state is. It's where object subject breaks down. So, and I first gained that through music, and that's really what people talk about when they're talking about, the Advaita connection to the Brahman and so forth. Pat Martino, every great performer I've ever known knows this intuitively. It is a common trope. Kendo, the way of the sword, literally means no mind. Not the word kendo, but the principle of kendo is no mind. Every expert level performer, think like gymnasts. You remember Simone Biles during the Olympics, during the Summer Olympics, when she was doing, or maybe it was the Winter one, I forget, when she was in the Olympics, and she backed out of the Olympics, right before the biggest event, right? And she said, well, I became conscious that I was spinning. I got the spins. That's what the gymnasts call it, when you become conscious of the fact that you're spinning through the air doing crazy stuff. And the moment that happens, then the object-subject dichotomy comes back, and then you're in yourself, and the object's something you have to work to interact with, as opposed to you transcend that and you enter that flow state each time. Performers, there's countless amounts of, you can go and look at all the empirical research on the flow state. Everyone's best performance occurs during the flow state. And during the flow state, there is no ego to speak of. There is no material to speak of. You are just in it necessarily. And that boundary between things blurs away, and you're just in a process of constructive happening. And then if you've trained the abilities so that you have a sort of automatic ground, you go on impulse and you just make things. That's why I can talk and play all the chords and stuff. I have not even thought about a single note. There's nothing I'm thinking about while I'm doing this. That's why I can communicate and talk to you all sorts of different things. And now I started to think about it when I started to say that, and then I almost played a weird note that felt kind of out of control or something. I feel that when I focus on my typing, messing up. Yes, because you gotta go into that flow structure in order to have the best performance. And so this is where it comes back to is it solipsism? No. In order for a person to get that flow state, they necessarily have to have the perceptual abilities grounded first before they can go and just flow on it. Not necessarily, but to achieve the goal they want from flow, they necessarily do. Because then the perceptions will automatically be mediated. We don't think about perceiving when we do it. We think about perceiving when we train perception. But then once we've perceived enough, we let the conscious thinking go away, and then we do the action, and the perception is there to mediate and modulate the action towards a constructive goal, That's true, Luciano, but I completely agree with what you said, by the way. So I'm about to say something in opposition to that, but I want to concede, yes, that's completely true. Not concede, but agree with you, that's completely true. However, that positions it as if a beginner can't enter flow. But that's the thing, is beginners can enter flow. Even if they aren't creating what they want, tell a beginner to let go of those boundaries, let go of I must do this thing or that thing, and just simply mash and get into it. And that process is where they get so much knowledge out of early in the experience. So a lot of people, they have trouble doing that. They think there's a certain thing I need to do to learn the new skill. No, get into it. Be a Right, because the first 2 years of life, Luciano, are your sensory motor stage. It's pre-symbolic reasoning. It's pre-symbolic knowledge. Piaget talks about this in his child development structures. We have intelligence before there is symbolic intelligence, and it's a form of sensory motor intelligence. And that sensory and motor intelligence literally is what the structure and the scaffold, it's like the bottom foundation for every other abstraction that we'll gain later. And it's how we learn. We see this in embodied cognition research. I could read some for you right now, but it's pretty. This is a great book, Movement Matters. It's basically a write-up and bibliography of all the embodied cognition research empirically that's occurred in the last 25 years and different things like that. And, you can see incredible effects where literally based on how a child counts sensory motor before they even have the symbolic reasoning, it literally will predict their math capacities for the rest of their life. You can still update and control that and train them, but I'm kind of speaking a bit strong there, but there's all sorts of different things. For example, if from Hawk 2006, if you have a bunch of subjects and you play action verbs for them in speech, like lick, pick, and kick, what eventually happens is that anytime you hear the word lick, the fMRI region's blood flows into the areas that control muscle coordination around the mouth. So literally, when you hear the word lick, your brain primes for a process of motor action around the mouth. Same with pick in the fingers, same with kick in the legs. And this is just one tiny example of this. This is demonstrated over and over and over. Your thoughts, your memories, not memories, your thoughts, the words you use, they are grounded in sense motor content. That's what makes them have meaning. And so it's we can even see experiments, for example, Harvest 2006. No, this is a different experiment. We'll talk about that in a second. But there's experience by Kuiper 2007, and then also corroborated by someone in 2012 as well, someone else, where basically subjects were exposed to these things called novel objects or nobjects. And nobjects, a single link to go to? Yeah, definitely. You can check out my Bandcamp, Zia Ero's music. Bandcamp. Here, I'll send my links real fast. So I've got a music Patreon where I talk about music theory, music stuff, philosophy. I'm working on my composition and whatnot throughout that stuff. And then also, if you want to check my Bandcamp, it's got all my music there, or not all my music, but some of my music you can download. And then my YouTube has music as well in case you want to hear full pieces and stuff. I didn't know that. Yeah, Asylum. There is no such thing as your mind and your body. Your mind and your body are the same thing. You gain things into your mind by enacting in the world with your body. And then your abstractions are built on top as higher order sense motor functions. Now, to talk about these novel objects, so when people were exposed to these brand new objects they'd never seen before, some were told to point at it and identify it. Okay, cool. That was one cohort. The other cohort was told to pantomime with their body a representation of a detail feature about the novel objects. And then between these two groups, the retention and the resilience of the knowledge around the novel objects was way higher for the ones that did meaningful interactions with them. And also, when we went and looked at their brains on fMRIs, the ones who grounded the novel objects in motion, when they saw the objects again, they literally replayed those motor behaviors again in their brain, but yet the group that only pointed did not. So there's literally a difference between having grounded knowledge and not grounded knowledge. It is incredibly important to have sensory motor grounding. That's why it's so people can say it's, you have to experience. I could read some other really interesting, experiments, including numbers. Numbers are grounded at first, at least the basic numbers, and then we take those basic numbers and we do higher order logic across them or whatever. But yeah, there exists, accessing number magnitude depends on a mental number line, which resembles visuospatial representations. Dehaney, 1992. Behavioral number comparisons experiments deciding which digit is larger, 6 or 2, provide objective evidence for the existence of an analog mental number line that has a logarithmic scale unit similar to the mental representations of size or intensity of sensory stimuli. Nieder, 2005. This is later coordinated even further by Lindman et al. 2007. And then lots of really interesting number experiments occur on different people. You can check out Domas et al. 2010, which talk about how counting in a child, different cultures and how they count as a child literally end up influencing the way that they process numbers later in their adulthood, all sorts of things. We think about numbers. I know, isn't that stunning, Lithics? I did not know that until I did not know that until recently, because we hear pitch primarily pseudo-logarithmically. We experience intensity pseudo-logarithmically, and that supports my primary argument, which is more of a spiritual argument, which is all perception is fundamentally harmonic. When you have a thisness or a thing that you're perceiving, it presupposes all the possible permutations that invariant perception could be in. And we even see this there's this interesting paper, let's see here, AI invariant perception. In neural nets. This just came out this December. Really, really crazy thing. Invariance of object detection in deep neural net harmonic learning. So what we found is that when we take a pull back, now of course this could be our perception because we order things necessarily harmonic based on how we perceive things, but nonetheless, universal Fourier features emerge in invariant networks. Learning and harmonics of learning. Essentially, AI machine learning was given big data sets, and they would basically identify that the machine was able to capture what operates as an invariant percept, which is what we have when we hear certain things. And then what they found is that when they took that set and reversed it, you get a Fourier transform back, which basically presupposes that invariant object in all possible forms, right? Infinitely. Same thing as the harmonic series. So you end up in this really weird, I think that perception is primarily harmonic. And so it's not just music, but it's also numbers, and our grounded interaction with the world ends up playing out that way, one way or another. Now, that's a bit more speculatory, so I would not just say that that's certain compared to the other things I said, which are a bit more certain, or at least more empirical evidence for, but there's a lot of really, really, really crazy stuff there. What's the book you were talking about again? Well, if you could only recommend 3 philosophy books for all of humanity to read, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend them then. I feel like a lot of philosophy is kind of talking about things that aren't really applicable so much. I mean, there's a lot of great philosophy, don't get me wrong. But I don't think for the average person reading, if they randomly hit them with 3 really good philosophy books, I don't know if it would hit the right way. Because once again, it's based on a ground. So I wish that we could get all people to understand how perception operates, because we are all stuck in that. And so when we see these conflicts around the world and we see all these things, it's like everyone goes down each other's throat and kills, like one or the other. It's like, that is literally a perceptual problem. That's not that, like, this or this thinking is a feature of the figure ground manifesting, where it's you select a thing by the extension of all the not things, and then once you have the thing selected based on the similarity and differences you infer from your ground, then you have an object form, and that closure, that law of closure, what they call it in the Gestalt theories, which you can check that. Hartman and Poffenberger have a great write-up of all the principles and facts that were found in Gestalt theories and such. But I mean, when you look at that figure ground within the object closure, you select a thing, and then once you have the thing, then you select it at the extent of all the not things. And that just constantly turns it so that everyone's thinking this or this instead of this and this, and let's figure out a way to integrate the two and understand something further. It's a big problem. I talk about that enough every day, so I should not talk about it now. But if I recommend 3 philosophy books, that's honestly so hard, because I think the things that I'm interested in with my ground are not going to be things that make such a big movement to others. You know, it's a big difference. If you recommend, there are no metaphysical boundaries between objects, but material parts must still be integrated in a systematic way. What is material? Material is a judgment of phenomena. You have a phenomenal field that you experience, and then as you parse that field based on certain axioms, you are identifying a category called material. You have not escaped perception by talking about material things. I mean, that doesn't mean I disagree that there's persistent phenomena out here, right? Like, I think if all humans were gone, the ocean would do what the ocean does, right? I'm not saying that there's no reality outside of perception, but that our inferences about where the boundaries are, even the claim that there's a thing called material, is a perceptual category necessarily so. So you don't get out of it. It's just what you put under that category that constitutes material. Because, I mean, if you want to go to the materialist argument, go to the very smallest level, and it doesn't even look like there's really anything there other than probabilities across multiple fields interacting. It's not really like material, you know. It's kind of paraconsistent, cause a lot of problems, and you know, Bell's inequality. I won't even get into all that with you, but let's see. Maybe start with 3 then. I would ask what you're interested in. Like, for me, some of the most important philosophy texts I ever read. I mean, reading Kant's Critique of Pure Reason was extremely impactful, but for the complete opposite reason that he landed on. Like, I had just never realized or considered how, like, time, space, which are both the substrate for causality, which is the substrate for the necessity argument, are literally presupposed in referential consciousness being. Like, that is a mind-blowing problem. And, Schopenhauer talked about it further in on the fourfold roots of the principle of sufficient reason. Leibniz talked about it in the principle of sufficient reason. But where Leibniz was a positivist about it, or he was like very pro, like, yes, this is necessarily the only thing, right? And Kant was also kind of then like, oh, well, then we'll trust all these things since they're prior to experience. I kind of take that the total opposite inversion. Schopenhauer was a bit more skeptical because he was very influenced by the Advaita traditions, very clearly so. So, I mean, the Critique of Pure Reason was a monumental read. Hegel's phenomenology of spirit was pretty monumental, but I didn't follow him into the teleological spirit phase of it. Not interested in that. I was interested in his claim to the absolute sense certainty. And I would probably this is just hard because I feel like the things that led to big things for me weren't a certain text, but the experiences that I have hitting into different texts. And at this point, most of the texts that I think about or read now, I wouldn't consider to be like big philosophical texts. I mean, they are. Like, I think Alvano has a lot of great work, the entanglement or sort of action perception, or the sort of just, you're not interested in teleology? I am, but I'm not like, I do have my own sort of teleologic inference, but that is not what I think. I'm just not interested in Hegel's teleology, really, or there's certain, like when I'm reading political philosophy, then I'm kind of interested in getting into like the telos that they have or whatever, but less so if I'm just thinking about broader metaphysical systems, and because I can understand they're gonna end with this story of where it goes. It's a story about where it could go, and that's like not so interested in that because I'm more so interested in the structural things. Metaphysical texts, I think you should read the Bhagavad Gita, but then again, I don't even know if that'll do anything for you. Like it's not about the text. That's the problem. It's about the ground that you have going into the text. I found that Pyrrhonist philosophy was influential for me. Outlines of Pyrrho by Sextus Empiricus was really interesting. I really found Aristotelian philosophy a long time ago to be influential, but not so much anymore. I have my own approaches to things. I like Quine, World and Object. I think Charles Sanders Peirce is probably my favorite philosopher ever. So if you haven't read Peirce, I would go recommend reading Peirce and read as much of Peirce as you can, because I think Peirce was just fantastic. So Dewey is pretty fantastic. Charles Sanders Peirce, Peircean. He's one of the giants of logic, and also has an incredible metaphysical. He's just amazing. I've never seen you live, and I want to let you know that you introduced me to the beautiful of the textured microtonal world. I'm really so happy to hear that, and I'm glad that I could expand or encourage you to expand on your own what you can listen for and what can move you based on what you feel. I'm really glad to hear that. Any thoughts on Jung? I have some in my library. I haven't read much of it, so very few thoughts. There was something that I liked that was cool. Also, Bandler is pretty good. Schoenberg really influenced my philosophies of music quite a lot. I do not have perfect pitch. Ever checked out generative grammar? Didn't sound familiar to me. Fichte is pretty interesting too, but once again, that's something I would never recommend anyone to read. Fichte. Let's see what some guy says. Let's see. Should we start from some imperative to demonize? Once again, you're doing causal boundaries. This is the whole thing. You're drawing objects between things. I think everything has dependent origination, so I would agree that it's not good too. But I will say that I'm pretty unquestionably against, cultures that essentially oppress women and have sort of slavery and so forth. Like the Houthis have a long track records from the Human Rights Watch organizations, from the UN itself, from groups inside the space, so I have no defense for them. I wouldn't say Yemen are Houthi. They're literally an insurgency group that's been at a civil war with the Saudis against the Yemeni people who have been basically, the Zaydic sort of problem. So, no, I'll draw causal boundaries there, but otherwise, I think you're looking at it kind of myopically, personally. I don't think that just because there's a certain condition that justifies the treatment of other people a certain way, and I also don't justify certain treatments that America might do that I would think against and be against fundamentally. So yeah, I just think that, but that does not excuse people to act in the way that they are, one way or another. I think placing landmines in civilian areas is bad, regardless if it's the Houthis, regardless if it's Americans, regardless if it's Israelis, placing landmines in civilian areas is bad. Stealing and rationing, stealing foreign aid and then selling it on the black market, which was confirmed by many groups that send aid to the thing. There's research, you can go and look on that. I also think that's bad, regardless of who does it. It doesn't matter who's doing it, You can create a justification for any action. That's the modal contingencies. Of course you can. So if your causal window expands to include the problems, let's say, that justify a certain thing there, but then they close up on another justification point, then you're just sort of being inconsistent about where you draw your boundaries. Based on, once again, your own perceptions of inference about what you think those spaces are like. Which is fine, but just be aware of that. I don't think attacking random ships is like a good thing. If you want to attack, if you're protesting Israel and you want to do that, go for those, sure. But shooting at random Japanese ships and random Norwegian ships and no, come on, that's ridiculous. You don't just get to randomly be violent for towards anybody if you're trying to make some cause that seems to be a claim that it's a strong cause or something. If you justify that, then you could work to justify literally anything. You could be oh, well, people in America who hate trans people, well, they've never met a trans person before. They don't know trans people. They don't mean anything by it. They've been misinformed. They grew up, okay, that doesn't justify it. Same with all sorts of cases you could draw like that. Things become slippery when you expand your causal boundaries based on your inferences of what you justify someone to be through or not. They've killed nobody because they haven't been able to. You don't think they would? That is so ridiculous. Their inability to do that does not justify the fact that they have not done. Yeah, exactly. At what point do you become the will of the country? Right, exactly. It's the causal thing. It's you're compressing all these people as one individual thing and then saying that's this boundary here that gets drawn, that then all those people, regardless of their individual conditions, get to do whatever because of this systemic material condition. I'm an anti-materialist, I read Lenin, I read Engels. I like Marx's critique of capital. That's pretty good. But I think Engels is nonsense. And I think Lenin is probably some of the worst metaphysics I've ever read. Lenin's empirico-criticism or whatever, materialism and empirico-criticism, one of the worst metaphysical arguments I've ever heard. And it makes sense too, because he was trying to debunk, or he was trying to own idealists. And he hadn't even read Hegel at that point. He read Hegel 7 or 8 years later. I'm not talking about the Galaxy Leader. That was over a year ago. I'm pretty sure that Galaxy Leader thing was not even recent. Hold on. Wasn't that a while ago? Hold on. Let me double check. That was November. Okay, so that was earlier on in the one. Yeah, I'm talking about the recent ones. also am not defending the U.S. actions, but when you start attacking random ships in the ocean along international trade routes, like, what do you expect is going to happen? I don't think that's I don't think it's a great thing to attack anybody, including them. But when you do that, what do you think is going to happen? I don't think it justifies it on either side. To try to do the justification for either side is just ridiculous. Different names for the 3 different minor 7s? Yes, I do. In a primodal context, those are just the pentyl minor 7, triprimal minor 7, and the harmonic minor 7. Or no, I wouldn't call it a harmonic minor 7. I would just call it harmonic 7. I wouldn't call it the minor 7 in that context there. But yeah, primodality ends up reducing a lot of the pools of intervals into pretty similar organization. I just think that materialism is fundamentally still idealism. Your inference of what is material and what is not material is purely through perception. And then your animation to get people to interact. No, okay, you're confusing. Okay, you're just confusing. I'm talking about the materialist philosophy. I don't mean taking into account the material conditions of a household or something like that, you know? Of course, like, you know, if you grow up in poverty, you'll have a completely different probabilistic outcome in life. I grew up in poverty, hello. You know, if you grew up like rural, you'll have a different probabilistic outcome. If you'll have, of course, those things are real, right? Of course. But I'm talking about materialism as a philosophy is what I'm critiquing. It should be a given that if you like grow up in a place that's like super impoverished, hello once again, hi, you know, your outcomes are like inhibited or hindered in some capacity or another, you know? Did you make any statements on Artax's, was that your point of criticism? My criticisms were mostly about how people are willing to justify, you know, literally anything that is just not what they believe to be good. So my criticisms are less specific about this side or that side and more about people who are willing to stand up and take a side purely based off of inferences of limited knowledge that they have, and then so much so that they're willing to justify murdering other people's lives based on their own inferences. That's my general criticism. So yeah, it's not side specific. I would do the same thing too and criticize any side that reduces the entire problem into something that ends up with this justification. I didn't criticize the Houthis for this blockade, bud, okay? I criticized the Houthis for their long laundry list of human rights violations and war crimes that has been documented by every watchdog group in the entire world, and not just American ones. International watchdog groups, the ones that also were the ones who implicated and said Israel's committing a genocide right now, the same ones that back the primary argument for the other sides about certain things. So no, what are they? Placing landmines in civilian areas, subverting aid and selling it on the black market, abducting over 2,700 individuals and blackbagging them, and that was confirmed by this watchdog Al-Manadi or whatever. And then let's say, how about the fact that they've essentially, well, there's only like, well, same things I would criticize Israel for. Not the same, there's a little bit more on there. Using child soldiers, which has been confirmed since at least 2015. That was something, or 2017 at least. multiple groups, including the UN, have asked them, please stop using child soldiers, and they even signed a pledge that they would like 2 years ago, and they still haven't stopped using child soldiers. So, that right away is a big problem, I could just keep going down the list. They have so many human rights violations from multiple independent groups. Saudis, dude, I think the Saudis are garbage too. Why would you think you're trying to like one side? Oh, well, how about this? I condemn all that. You're like, the fact that you're so one-side brained, it's actually cringe. Like, you can't stop thinking about one or the other. And that's what I've been trying to say with perception. That's a perceptual principle. Of course you can't, because you don't have meta-perception, I hope you can seek help and start to look at the world in more than just black and whites. I really hope you can. I didn't come here to talk about politics, so you're about to get kicked out of my room. But nonetheless, I hope you can stop being so one-sided about everything and not seeing how each person involved in all these conflicts feels they're justified. And if you can't understand that, then we're not going to find peace on this earth, but all the parties and all sides of this believe that they are justified in what's occurring on all the conflicts that occur. And until you can recognize that, we're just going to continue to have endless reciprocal violence. It's so silly. Like, you think that, these people are more justified in well, the people on the opposite side literally think they're more justified. Okay, now what? Right? The idea that you're going to like try to get some objective measurement of who's most justified to kill the other person is literally the reciprocal violence that continues to create dependent originated violence over and over in the world. And that's what I said before. It's about perceptual problems. Because I already think the Saudis are evil. What are you talking about? I literally see, you have a list of, because I literally been arguing with people about the Houthis, okay? I thought that Saudi Arabia is like a giant evil organization, corporation, like probably they were behind 9/11, literally from like oh my God, the fact that you're like, what about, can't you name these? Insane. You literally can't think in anything other than one or the other. It's like sad. I really feel bad for you. It's crazy. Please seek help. Try to recognize it's not all black and white. Every person on every side of this conflict thinks that they're justified. And until people recognize that, it's not going to end. So they're all messed up, Cheers. Any advice on how to persuade my parents to let go of black and white thinking? Well, if I could persuade your parents, I would persuade all these other people too. It's difficult. I think that once people kind of embody and recognize the patterns and principles that perception sets up, it ends up creating a lot easier ability to step outside of that. I think to get outside of black and white thinking, you need meta-perception. You need to be able to recognize that your first thought about the thing is not necessarily accurate. Even your second thought or your third thought, I believe it's all one thing anyways. So the idea that we're going to try to draw all these boundaries that justify certain things is ridiculous. It's literally all one thing, and we're all implicated in all of it. Can you talk about your anti-materialism views? Yeah, I just don't think that material is like a thing that can be like captured. Material is a category in perception. So once again, if you argue that everything is material, what you're arguing is everything is a perceptual category that I've identified to be something. So you come back to material again, and then if you look at like Lenin's arguments, like materialism and empirical criticism or whatever, same with Engels' arguments or whatever, the dialectic material problem, there's a lot of cool stuff there. There's good inferences there. Like I would say like Marx has some pretty good inferences about capital. I think there's a lot of problems with capital. Probably need reformed, but in general, the idea that we can like put material in a certain order and it predicts the outcome of the world is like ridiculous. There's nothing that supports that. And not only that, but then the only way that we get that to be happening in the first place, to even get revolutions like that, is an idea influences somebody. So it's like you're telling me the person wants to say that it's all material, so then what they do is they write a book, right? And then they have people read the book, which transfers ideas. And then once those ideas are transferred, they're supposed to inspire action, which is not material. It's from idea. So like you only take actions. Yes, the material impacts things, but it comes from your ideas fundamentally. And so if you can inspire someone to take action, you're not doing that through material. You're doing that through ideal. The way that we organize our societies and the way that we get people involved and the way that we get people motivated, the way that we get actions occurring is like we end up necessarily having to work through idea again. It's the only way we can convey things to people. So it's like people want to be like, oh, not only that, but I also think it's really concerning where people have taken like Engel's ideas in dialectical materialism and essentially believe in like a literal science of material, where if you just organize this way, you will be at peace and everything will be finished. I don't believe there's an end point to society. There's no end state. The one thing that's constant is change and unfolding. And any political philosophy that says we're going to ride off into the sunset once we do this, that's not a philosophy that I trust politically. Because no, it's about actively being involved and trying to keep the ship steering right in a decentralized and organized way between people. Because it's like, we don't know what's going to come next. We don't know what new challenge is going to emerge. And so the idea that we kill a bunch of people, put all the material in one place, and then that's supposed to fix everything is ridiculous, because the way that perception works is that we observe similarity and difference. And so it's not like envy goes away when everyone has their base needs met. Maybe when everyone has their base needs met, which I do believe in UBI, by the way. I would say that where we're headed now, we need UBI pretty quick in order to get through this next chapter that we're about to get through, you know? But it's like, and then not only that, but then the causal boundaries. Lenin starved and murdered so many peasants. He's like talking about the proletariat, the working class. What about the peasants, right? I mean, well, they had property, they had capital they needed to give over. It's like, come on. I'm not even talking about the kulaks. No, the kulaks were later. I'm talking about the earlier peasant war that happened before the kulak. Before that, because Lenin did that too. Stalin also went ham on the peasants, but Lenin started it. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's how convenient that you'll take people who aren't even living like some super fancy lifestyle just because they have some property that they work really hard on, and you're going to take it from them and kill them. If they don't want it, then you'll starve them out, or you'll literally, it's just insane, So the idea that we put material in the right way, like it's exodia, and then it makes people think a certain way is just ridiculous. There's nothing that supports that at all, Otherwise, we could stop, we could fix mental illness through material, but we know that's not true. It requires a person literally engaging with and introspecting and trying to understand their own experiences and ideas. And yes, if the material conditions were different, then certainly I'm sure there'd be different patterns of what happens more often, what happens less often, but it's not going to solve all the problems, and it's not like it's done. It's literally like exodia, like you put the right of arm exodia in this, and you put the head and the torso and the legs, and whoa, everything's fixed. It doesn't work that way. The idea that we can enter a state of sort of a state of flatness is just ridiculous. There's always change, always new contour in the world, always new things occurring, always new ideas which change people's ideas. Believing in an ideal end state it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting telos when you put it that way. I necessarily wouldn't discreetly disagree. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's unrealistic. Like, what the hell? The one thing that we can be certain of is that we can't predict the future. And so what they want to try and do is, like, the materialists will want to take the superstructures of society, orient them in a way to predict all outcomes of human well-being. That's scary. And then they'll try to do it under the guise of empiricism and materialism and how it's science, when in reality, it's not empiricism, because you haven't actually looked at what comes next. You're using dialectics to try to project what would come next out of a superstructure against a collective. We create the superstructure through idea. All of us as individuals live in our own ways, and that the combined emergence creates the superstructures we end up with. And then people end up with undue influence, and they can subvert that and try to cheat that. And sure, there's all kinds of problems there. And like I said, I think there was a lot of good critiques that came from Marx, but the Engels, like, science, dialectical materialism is like psychopathic level stuff. And then like the Lenin stuff, he didn't even understand idealism. He literally tried to critique all these idealists not even having read Hegel, and he giantly missed the boat altogether. So, and then he read Hegel like 7 years later and inverted a lot of his views, but kept them in material. He did the same material inversion that Engels did. So I think we should have more ethical structures. I think we should try to move towards more decentralization. We should have stronger labor unions. We should have syndicals. We should have more of that, more ability to let people decide for themselves in increasingly local, sub-regional ways like that. The other thing too is authoritarianism is not very sturdy, because like it can't adapt to conditions as easily. I know a lot of people say, whoa, bigger capitalism. Well, I'm not really defending capitalism either, but because in a way capital becomes centralized, which is why it can't react to big things. But decentralization is always more robust, right? The network becomes stronger, and then so when a thing gets pushed against the network or a new challenge emerges. When you say ethical, what are you talking? I don't know what context you're talking about there, Harrison. Like I've read Engels, and I would definitely say I'm more of like a progressive. I would like to move towards like increasingly stronger structures that support people, but in a way that's very sensical and sturdy and durable. And that comes not from like a centralized process necessarily doing that, but decentralized organization creating stronger worker rights. And not like, oh, let's all just like create a violent wing and then just like murder a bunch of people who disagree with us, and then we put the capital and material. Because then what you do is you fall into the same problem of dependent origination again with violence, where if you think you're justified to do violence, and then let's say you get your way and you violently get rid of everyone who doesn't get in your way, it's going to come back to bite you down the road. You know, you have done something and put something into the world, which will come back to you. Don't know when, 100 years, whatever, but it'll come back to you. Because you can't force people to think a certain way. Are people who, not hate, I should say the phenomena, it's not people I should say, but I really dislike this modern phenomena of where it's like, you disagree with me on one small issue? Wow, you're a piece of shit, and I think you should die. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I probably agree with you on like 70% of the issues you're talking about. What are you talking about, my friend? Like if I don't qualify for your special group, like who does? You know? It's super social media terminally online. You go out in the world and talk to actually people, and like nobody like is moving in that kind of it's so weird. It's the strangest thing. But that's because well, of course that depends, right? I agree with that, Max Houghton. But I'm talking about like social media is kind of powering that. I have a great friend of mine who she's a communications scholar. She does like work in like communications theory and stuff. And you know, one of her thesis is basically on like how social media is like changing the communication landscape and how propaganda is working on it differently. And you know, one of the things that her and I have talked about a lot is how she kind of thinks that social media is creating this space where it basically she thinks of social media where it's basically forcing us to reduce conversation. Obviously that's pretty obvious, but then the way I would interpret that is like we're getting exposed to only certain symbols that are coded and primed to be from a certain symbol other group, right? Whatever. So it comes back to perceptions. Like there's this group and you perceive them and have a group name, then there's this other group, and then each group is an echo chamber, so they quickly start to adopt each other's language, each other's symbols, each other's forms, and then then we put those out on an engagement market, and then whatever tends to click the most engagements, then that becomes the form for that entire thought group. And that's like crazy. Like what is good policy is literally not like what is most engagement driving. Like I almost think it's probably the opposite. I feel like good policy is probably boring as shit, you know, where like it's about finding compromise, and it's about finding a way forward and integrating the different voices together and reaching an agreement on something, as opposed to like literally turning it into, like someone said in chat, like a neo-tribalist war or something like that, you know? It's weird. That's true. Social media can be great for dissenters thought too, but then the problem is dissent from who, right? Because if it's like just a random dissenting thought on you kind of get ostracized from an in-group, basically, based on what you dissent to. So I think that there's a little bit of that problem going on too. I think I'm going to get, there's a whole bunch of communication things like that. Agree, and this is coming from a conservative. Right on. Yeah, I'm definitely not a conservative, but, my whole family is, I grew up around a conservative family. So, some of my families were not conservatives, but, basically every single person I grew up around was. So it's kind of like, I don't think conservatives are necessarily evil. I think that small pockets of really hateful conservatives can be pretty evil, but that's the same with small pockets of the other, whatever you want to call the other side, further left or alt left or whatever it happens to be, right? I don't think it's like side specific necessarily. Although I will say that the conservative embracement of hierarchy, I think, is a little concerning. And I think that's kind of fundamentally less moral based on my values. So I think that, sure, there's hierarchy that forms out of interaction, but at the same time, we should do our best to make sure that no one is left behind in a way. So that's kind of my... I kind of feel like I'll eventually write a big political philosophy work or something like that, but my metaphysics comes first. It's more like metaphysics. It's not really metaphysics, but... And then after my metaphysics is going to come first. A lot of my music stuff I'm working on and voice stuff is kind of going to come first, but the metaphysics stuff is grounding all that. So, and then after that, I'll eventually write my political treatise, my political philosophy essay or whatever, or book, or I don't know what it'll end up being. But my biggest thing with political problems in general is we need better education. And I don't just mean education like we sit in a classroom and teach people concepts that everyone agrees should be we need real embodied education. And education is the single most important thing that we can give people around the world, because from that then we can be more empowered agents to make our own decisions, to influence the world in the way that we seem fit, and then the decentralized structures become even more strong and resilient, because people are able to not be so persuaded by things that they aren't so critically engaged in. People don't just repeat back opinions that they haven't sort of thought about and grounded in their own ways. I think that education is just so incredibly important. Education allows people to live a more fulfilled life. Not that you need education to be fulfilled, but you can see what options are even there. It's it expands what body of knowledge you have. But I think it shouldn't just be about coldly teaching people. It should be about teaching how we learn to people, teaching people how to become their own teachers. That's what education should be. And I think that nothing could be more important than doing that, because then we create a world full of more art, more abilities, more ideas, more productive arguments, all sorts of things. So I think that... See, that's a big problem though, Giraffe, because when you're on the internet, you're not embodied. So the internet is never going to be a replacement for quality level education. You can learn a lot from the internet, and you can work with teachers and watch video, sure, but literally you learn through inaction. So if you're literally sitting here watching, you're not learning it in the same way that you will if you're actually engaged in the world with these new ideas or around ideas in general. This is shown over and over in the embodied cognition research. You can get fact statements, but that doesn't translate into your autopoietic or practopoietic interactions in the world. And we need people to have the spark unlocked where they recognize that they're the ones in control of what they learn and how they learn, to be critical thinkers of not just I'm critical of things I disagree with, but even critical and engaged in the dialectic internally for themselves. I learn everything easier in person, orbital. I completely agree. I can also learn if I'm with a teacher on the internet or something too, because at least there you still have the feedback, which is you're really being in action with someone basically. But if it's watch this video and learn from it, it's really hard for me to do that. I can get some cool ideas from it, and those can connect to what I already know, and they can inspire new actions and stuff, but I gotta do the action for it to even mean something. AI will be revolutionary. I completely disagree with that. It'll be revolutionary, 100% agree with that. But when you say it'll be revolutionary for education, I don't agree with that, actually. Because they don't share a ground. Maybe once we have cybernetic and the multimodal sensing systems that are able to then but still they don't perceive like us, and that's a problem because we talk and learn and work a particular way with each other, where one person has embodied, and not only that, but we have mirror neurons. We don't have mirror neurons with an AI, right? So like the AI is trying to do stuff, we don't have a mirror neuron for that unless it has a human form. But even if it has a human form, it doesn't have operating on the shared cultural ground that we have. It's inferred a cultural ground from trillions of data points related that the scanning for probabilistic outcomes in a very Bayesian way is nowhere even close to what we do, you know? So and the problem is humans literally live embedded in the world from the beginning. And not just that, but the human organism is an embedded result of a chain of embedded organisms that have been around for, and processes that have been around for billions of years. So I'm pretty bearish on AI. I mean, I like the technology and I'm excited for the technology, but there's a lot of things I'm really bearish about because I think the people developing it have kind of confused themselves, have like kind of tricked themselves into thinking that it's like, that it has like a ground that it doesn't actually have. And not all of them. I follow a lot of different AI researchers and I stay involved in that discussion, but the way that I see people like misunderstanding the way that humans learn and the way like humans operate relative in our perception to like the way the machine perceives and operates and develops and interprets, they're literally not even close. Yeah, they're smart, but really missing what they're doing. Unless you're talking about me, but I don't think I'm missing what they're doing at all. I quite am very knowledgeable about the way that our machine learning stuff works, even the most up-to-date, like, multimodal agents, which I think we have to have those in order for anything useful to come through at all, because then they have a real sensory ground. And embodied cognition shows us it's not like we're our mind, so we can build models of what the mind does, but that's not what it does. We build things through that's a good point. That's a great way to put it too, Max Houghton. Yeah, that's closed AI. Yeah. I mean, I just think it's no technologist ever in history has been able to predict the way that their technology is going to impact the world, and I think that giving such power to such a limited small group of people who are obviously myopically focused on like the formalist structures of the thing and like interpreting as if it is a thing, like it's doing what humans do, look, we can do what we do. It's like it's literally not doing what we do. We don't require trillions of whatever data points to then come to a conclusion. We don't have data points. It's embedded in our knowledge the entire way through. It's not like it's not like there's discrete points. And even the training data is pretty ridiculous. I don't believe in, no, Harrison, you got me completely wrong. Just by saying that, okay, let me get this. We don't have a provably more meaningful method of absorbing information, but we have a provably more grounded way of absorbing information. We don't get discrete packets of things. We discover the world for ourselves. We aren't loaded with true statements and fact statements prior to then which we probabilistically infer to arrive at a mimicry that projects functions that we see in humans. That's not what we do. We discover the world for ourselves. We discover language for ourselves. That's why it takes us literally years to get out of the sensory motor stage alone. So no, I don't, a very Christian standpoint of sacredness, I do believe that we're sacred, but not because of some spirit, but because we are embedded, enacted, and we are in the world. We are embodied. We have embodied cognition. It's not like there's a mind process that's calculating pieces. It's that our action literally gives irreducible forms of knowledge, and that irreducible form of knowledge doesn't come from a data set that was trained into you. It comes from your experience, and you can call that a data set, but it's not, because it's always a monad. It's always irreducible. It reholds and reselects a single thing. That is why humans can operate with barely any energy, and you need giant facilities of power and giant GPUs to literally get basic function of language out of these large language models. They're not at all even close to the way that humans have cognition. Not even close. So it's no, it's not about the sacredness of the human spirit. It's about the fact that we are really embedded in the world, and we are really embodied, and we are the chain of embodiment that's occurred for billions of years at this point. Like I said earlier, less than half the cells in your body are human, human DNA. Okay, so it's not even like humans are like these machines or computational robot. No, we literally emerged from interaction, from dynamic in the world being, as opposed to being in a closed thing and then being loaded with stuff ahead of time, like pre-symbols. We are certainly loaded with certain capacities, but the content that comes into those is we discover entirely for ourselves. So no, it couldn't even be further. I don't think, no, it's not about the sacredness of the human spirit. It's about that recognizing that we shouldn't confuse that a machine can do some really interesting cases of function, that even means it's doing anything like human function. And we should care about human function, and we should care about how humans function, because only other humans are humans. And I don't believe you're conscious because you say, I am conscious. I believe you're conscious because you have it. You are an embodied being. You're embedded in the world. You're enacted, and your cognition is extended through the connections that you have around the world. And then you go and discover who you are. You're not taught that. You literally discover you figure out object permanence on your own. No one tells you that there are permanent objects or anything like that. And so like that alone is like, you figure that out really early in life, and you discover everything about yourself. And then eventually you discover the ability to say, I am. And you don't discover it because there was all this word that you got loaded with, because all those words now have grounded meaning from real action in the world that's sensory motor connected. So it's not even close to the related thing, you know? We come into the world with will. We come into the world with intention. We don't have to be asked to give intention out or to give will out. We start exploring the world the moment we're born. It's completely different. You're comparing a biological drive with a technical one. That we have very limited concept of artificial consciousness even now. Yeah, what do you think I'm saying exactly? I'm confused. Do you think I'm saying that I don't think AIs eventually could become like sentient or something? Or AIs couldn't eventually become super intelligent AGI? Because that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that the cognitive functions of how we approach right now, since they're not multimodal agents, or if they are, it's very limited multimodal agents, I think it's interpreted through a large language model, which isn't multimodal, that ends in a completely different structure that literally has very little ground to connect to humans, which means the way it will teach us, the way it will infer, the way it will communicate, the way it will learn things. Who cares then? You know, it's not going to do anything for you as a skill. You can make it do things for you, but then you don't have the ability or capacity being developed anymore. No, I don't think so, Mark Johnson. Yeah. I mean, some people do, but it's more of a speculative. I don't really think that's the problem so much. Consciousness isn't even really the big problem of it all. The problem is the coherency. Even if there becomes AGI into the world and it can figure out all these truths about the universe, you realize it has to put that back in an order which is coherent for humans to understand. We have a certain structure of what can be coherent. And so it necessarily has to communicate back to us through a coherent channel. And there can exist truths of experience and truths of knowledge which cannot be put back into coherence for us. And so it's like that's the wrong tech tree. I mean, we should continue to use that as technology, and it's going to be cool, and there's a lot of fun things, especially like translation stuff's kind of cool, but even then human translators are like more accurate, and they capture the cultural nuance, they capture the ground of a culture. So I mean, I think there's cool functions that AI does already and can do even better and can improve even more. But it's totally different ground. And humans have this shared ground that we all have. Different content in the ground, but we have the shared ground. And so we end up in this closer, coherent relationship with each other. I don't think we should want there to be a super intelligence that's incoherent, that has a first-person perspective we don't understand. Why would we want that? We're basically centralizing authority at that point, right? If there's something that claims to be super intelligent and it seems to be able to solve all these functions and do all these kinds of things, everyone is going to de facto believe that argument or that point is the most high authority structure that exists. And yet you have no clue if what it's telling you is accurate or not, or if there's a deceptive, or it's hallucinating, or if its coherency is actually spitting it back into a form that's not actually what it's You have no way to interpret that or infer that. And the way that superintelligence runs, I mean, you can't even, you can't even get close to it. So no, I don't, you're supposing there's something unique about, no, I'm not. No, I am not. I can't believe you'd even say that. No, I'm not presupposing that at all. I'm presupposing that The way that we get emergent meaning is through the fact that we do have a certain brain structure, a certain sensory modality, which is unified and reduced in a constant whole, which is continuous and indiscrete. But that's not the key. The key is that plus our cultural relations, which created that ground, which was created from a chain of embodied actions for billions of years. And then not only that, but this necessary problem that we end up with where meaning is emergent from the material we take in and the fact we have intention and will and a ground of experience. It is not about the human brain. It has very little to do with the human brain. It has to do with the unique intersection that we are in the world based on how we came to be and how we create emergence always. We're necessarily emergent always. And that's not the case when you're working on a discrete operational hardware. Right? I could find the exact seed of the large language model, or let's say I'm working with a visual thing, right? And I ask it for like Mid-Journey, I ask it for a certain prompt and it makes a thing. I could technically get the seed that took and reproduce it. The exact thing. That never happens with humans ever. It can't. That is never going to happen ever with the human. We don't have a discrete base of knowledge or a discrete base of experience. It is continuous. And that's part of what makes us so irrational and so incoherent and changed. I thought models were non-deterministic. It depends. It depends on what you're talking about. Different stages, different phases. And no, they're not non-deterministic. There is not that strong emergence that has occurred inside of the machine yet. Like, for example, I typed in a Mid-Journey prompt that someone else wrote the other day when I was checking like some claim about someone's like copyright information. Sure enough, I got essentially the exact same thing. And that wasn't even using the exact seed. That was just off of a string that literally spit back the exact image from a thing that it had sampled prior, which ended up with all of its data in it prior. What's your thoughts about third spaces, losing third spaces? I think that's a huge problem. Well, yes and no, Harrison. We're not top down or bottom up in our brain. We're constantly irreducibly middle out. But even saying that's not right. There's no direction when we analyze our own mind. It just is. It's happening and it's unfolding emergently. We engineer AI from the ground up, indeed. Yeah, but with discrete data and with training samples that are discrete and then are passed through and sampled down and then merged in, and then some of that data actually resides in the training data in the actual model almost verbatim, word for word, even though it should be scrubbing it and flipping it and doing all kinds of permutations with it. It doesn't work like that because it's still discrete. It's linear. It's still operating like that. Let's see here. We have so many different subsystems, and we're a symbiont. We have literally multiple components and multiple parts and multiple systems. And some of those systems are not even us. They're like completely different organisms, like our gut. Our gut has almost little to do with humanness to begin with. It has to do with what we take in, all these different bacteria that have co-evolved with us for billions of years. It is not us, but the broader life tradition on Earth. It is so much more than just there's a brain that's doing a thing. And that's what I'm trying to explain to you about embodied cognition. Your mind is not your brain, okay? That's where we can localize and say it's seated here. But the way that the things get in the brain is through your actions in the world and your intention and your will out with actions using an embodied seat of you. It's so much more than your brain. It's like the idea that our mind is just like a computational thing that's doing simple tasks like that is completely missing how we form the ground, how we pull the ground back up, how it's irreduced the whole way through, how it's continuous the whole way through, how it's emergent or responsorial to other things. There is no discreteness about anything that we take in, literally from 6 months old when we first start taking qualities in from the environment and starting to get that, and then all the way to our adulthood. There's nothing discrete about our experience at all. That's important. Let's see here. But no, it's not like the human brain. I don't think the human brain is like a strong computer that does cool stuff. That's not how I think about it. The strong computer that makes us conscious is the whole body. Are you pro or against Cartesian dualism? Cartesian dualism is silly. We are not the mind or the body or the internal and the external. We're both. The way that we become who we are is by experiencing stuff sensory, but then also our will against it, necessarily integrating with it and becoming unified. So when you're making music, it's not like you're hearing just the sound or you're just thinking about what you want, but you meet in the middle and the sound and what you want become the sort of same thing, and then you control in that space. And embodied cognition shatters this illusion of Cartesian duality. There's not the mind-body difference. There's the mind and the body are together. That's one thing. We learn the world through our body. Our body is our mind, and our body powers our mind, and our mind organizes the body so that it can access and get new things. And the idea that there's this lens or this filter that's like, there's an external and an internal. No, I mean, yes, I have an internal affective state, but the external influences my internal affective state just as much as my internal does, right? Like if I see a thing I'm scared of, like a spider, I have this freaky reaction or whatever. If you have a fear of spiders, your reaction was internal in response to how you connect to stimuli that hits you from quote unquote an external, right? But then you show that spider to someone who loves spiders and it's not scary at all. It's not like you are an internal being and then the external is like this completely separate world. I mean, the external is a kind of separate thing, but then again, it's kind of not. Because, for example, even when we check in perceptual research, I mean, there's numerous studies that show this. When you are in a room with high ceilings, your creative cognitive capacities increase. When you're in a room with short ceilings, your focus and your rational abilities increase. This has been proven multiple times through test studies, and you don't even know. You don't notice how tall the ceiling is. You don't have to notice your external environment for it to literally impact your cognition internally. So this is the other fourth E of embodied cognition. It's extended. Your cognition's not in your mind or it's extended in the world. You are embedded in the world. And that is irreducible from who you are and what you do and what you believed that you could do and how your perceptions form and what actions you could take. You know, it's literally so more than like there's a little thing in your brain, you have a mind and you're this thing and you follow this pattern. It's so much more than that. And like I said, that ceiling height research, that is demonstrated over and over and times again empirically. Further, it also works in VR. VR rooms with higher ceilings literally create the same cognitive effect. VR rooms in narrow ceilings literally create the same cognitive effect because of this embodiment process. Same with, here's another example of how human cognition is just so wild. If you have someone fake a smile and you force someone to smile and then they read a sentence about a positive thing, they can cognitively grasp that and master the content of that passage faster than if they were not smiling or if they were frowning. This is Havas 2006. It shows priming actually matters. When you literally physically smile, even when you're not happy, it changes how you can cognate. It changes how you process cognition. That's why it's like to try to talk like an LLM is like even remotely even a similar ballpark. It can become crazy high level intelligence or whatever, all these different things like that. Sure, that's cool, but it's literally not what's going on with us. And we have a very unique thing that's really interesting. And it's like, rather than wash it away with like a super high level, like system like that we can't ground to, like we should understand our own thing better, not understand that thing more. I mean, we should do both, right? It's not one or the other. But I just mean like people place like way too much like ontological status in AI without even investigating like what they don't even recognize that human cognition is so blended and blurred and so complex and emergent and not like seated in one place, that's crazy here. I don't know how I feel about the higher ceilings. I'll never be able to forget it when I look at ceilings now. I know I was like super skeptical about that. I mean, the research shows it over and over, so I could post some specific research articles in chat for you too if you want to look at those. I mean, and then the priming thing, literally smiling and reading sentences that have happy things when the content is aligned with the embodied behavior that you're primed to, you literally process it better. Same with if you frown and read a sentence that's happy, like you don't process that like better. In fact, you process it much worse. Content unalignment matters and embodiment matters. Play something jazzy and smooth. I have been. I'm just sort of engaged. I'm glad to be able to sing the praises of embodied cognition, because embodied cognition it feels like that's what we have not been understanding for literally years. We had the constructivists and we had the foundationalists in education. We had all these different forms of the Cartesians that have influenced the way that we think about stuff forever, but like none of that is like the stuff that we like, because it's messy. When you start to think about cognition as something that's not simply a mental process, but it's an environmental process, when you start to think about it as an internal environment and an external environment and the synthesis of those things, it becomes a lot messier and not as prone to being formalized. And our researchers want to reduce things. Reductionism exists basically everywhere in our culture right now. And we prioritize the reductionism but yet our cognition is the last thing from reduction. I mean, we do reduce during perception, but we reduce into new holes that can basically have like insane amounts of detail and complexity inside each of those holes. and dynamically re-whole too. I do like some AI researchers there's some AI researchers out there who I feel have a really grounded and integrated way to think about it, and they're trying different approaches that aren't just like large language models doing stuff. I know, that's another one, Odon. Isn't that funny? It's like, you wouldn't like expect to like create a model on a computer of you. This is a quote from, not a quote, it was an argument from Bernardo Kastrup, by the way. But so I'll say that before I repeat this argument. But you wouldn't expect like a model of the urinary tract on a computer to literally start pissing unless you had physical hardware that supports that capacity, right? But then for some reason with consciousness, it's like, oh, we just put the data in the right way, and like we should get the same thing come out of it, right? That is so strange that we don't think that with it. We wouldn't think about programming a heartbeat and then literally our computer like has a heartbeat, or like a heart that's happening. Like we would never think in that way. But when we think about like consciousness, it's like completely the other way. It's so strange that people think of it this way. And yet, because we've been bought into this illusion that like our society has enforced on us through the way that we approach education, the way that we think about learning, the way we think about abstraction, that like you're your mind and your body's like, you're like this agent up here in your mind and your body's separate. When in reality, see, even when I talk, my fingers and hands move because I'm an embodied cognate. I can't not think with my body, because that's what it means to think, is to use your body and to do things in the world with your body. And then we can start to get different things too, and we can abstract into higher orders where it's less grounded in the body, but it still starts that way. Otherwise, you're talking about something that's incoherent. Yeah, I like that argument too. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? It's like, why would we ever assume that about something? Like consciousness is like literally the most black box, most complex feature about basically our entire bodies that we've ever even come to interact with. It is the only thing that we have zero like stake in understanding, essentially, like in itself. And we wouldn't expect the stuff we actually do to understand to like just randomly start happening when we model. Like it's just so weird. It's so strange that we could even get to this like epistemically ungrounded position. But most people don't realize that most knowledge they have came through the ground of sensory motor connection. Because there's kind of this fancy idea of like abstraction being the higher form of it, when in reality it's like abstraction is a kind of higher form, but it's a higher form from something that you lived in for years. Most people don't even think about their pre-conscious experience in life. You can't, right? Because you're not conscious of it. You're not aware of it. You spend and you stir in the world for literally like 2 years, 3-4 years. Like before you even have like your first memory, like 2 years, 3 years before you even have like a strong first memory. And that's all. You already have intention. You already have will. You're literally acting in the environment. You're interacting with objects. You discover the whole world. You live in a soup of sensory motor connection in the world the entire time. And then when we get older, we forget the ground. Necessarily so. That's the figure ground problem. You select the thing at the extent of all the not things. So the moment you think you're like this intelligent, abstract agent, by focusing on how intelligent and abstract you are, you're literally not looking at the bottom ground of it all that led to it in the first place, phenomenologically. All the experiences you had, all the stuff you were taught, but not taught by words, but by literally being and doing and taking actions and pointing, and someone says that's dog, and they point at the dog, you literally pet the dog and love the dog and hold the dog and feel the dog, and the dog, the dog's got like you're in the world with the dog. It's not like you download a bunch of pictures of dog and then you map it into this like language and like dogness. That's not how we do it. Is piano your main instrument? My main instrument is my body, whatever that is, my voice, my body, because the piano is played by my body, music is composed by my body, and I can play lots of instruments and compose lots of things and play all sorts of things because I work on the more fundamental level to the music. which is the connection to the music, not so much the specific mechanics. I do play piano a lot, though. I'd say that at this point, piano is... I'm pretty strong at it, but in reality, drums are my first instrument, and I played drums longer, so I'm fundamentally more of a percussionist, not a pianist. Piano was something I learned much later in my life, and I discovered on my own initially. Yeah, it depends on how you define consciousness. I've been reading Lycan's Experience and Consciousness book, which is a really interesting argument. He's like a neo-materialist who tries to put forth a material argument to save consciousness, or basically. And his book's great, by the way. I'm not a materialist, but I do like Lycan's consciousness book so far, and he defines a lot. He defines like 8-9 different categories of what people normally refer to in consciousness, different classes of it, all sorts of things. And he's the whole book is him trying to make a neo-materialist argument for consciousness, to quote unquote, as he says it, to save consciousness from qualia, so to speak. That's Lycan. Someone asked who? Lycan, Consciousness and Experience. It's like a neo-materialist argument for... it's not even just that. He's a great... his tone is really fun and playful. His arguments are good. He's a great thinker for sure. So, I think his pushback against the knowledge argument is like super weak, to be honest. Which of course it has to be. That's the thing. You can't escape that as a materialist. Sorry. The knowledge argument crushes everybody because it's true. It's like a pragmatic. I see it all day in what I teach and stuff. And unless you say like, oh, well, the qualia is like stored in the brain or something, that's not what makes you do the thing that you got. Like, it's the experience that forms the ability to interact in a meaningful way with the thing that lets you do the thing you want. Knowledge argument being like the Mary in a red room argument. Or I like to do I've sort of formulated an argument similar to that before I understood the Mary argument, which is actually different. It's kind of a knowledge argument for qualia, but it's a knowledge argument for qualia plus a problem, exposing the problem of chains of fact statement about empirical observation when you don't have access to qualia, and how that can't give a closed space. So that's an argument I like a lot, and I've been formulating it a little bit better and trying to get that written down a little bit better, because I think it's a good argument, and I think it kind of crushes a lot of problems, both in reductionism and also, well, it shows the problems of reductionism relative to perception, relative to how qualia informs what the access to the thing is that we could even get. So I like that thought. Is piano your favorite instrument? Not really. Piano I'm kind of bored of these days. I'm not bored of, but it's the 12 notes on it, standard tuning of it. It's just everything kind of feels similar in sound, and it's not, because you can do all kinds of different stuff, but it just kind of feels samey, after a bit, like with my ears at this point. Why 31 and not either? I do use other tuning systems. I use all tuning systems. Tuning systems are just a set. You can see in my works that I've composed a lot in just intonation. I'm actually a just intonation theorist. I focus more on the harmonic series, just intonation, subharmonic structures, retroverted structures, whatever you want to call those. I focus a lot on those kinds of things, like theoretically. And then a lot of my work is in like, for example, Witchcraft was in just intonation, 29 Noneji, Hex is in just intonation. I've been working a lot on Hex, by the way. Like a lot on Hex. One question I still have, though, is how could emergence exist without a notion of boundaries of the material parts? Wouldn't you say those boundaries emerge from emergence of a phenomena? So I don't think you need that at all for emergence. Yeah. Because all of it's emergent, right? If we took a true materialist argument, we would say that even on the quantum level, let's say it's all just fields interacting, whatever. Just okay, what made then those fuse together? Well, you'd have to say, well, it emerged into more concrete particles. Let's say that the quarks gave rise to heavier single proton, whatever, and then those fuse into electrons finding pairs. It's all emergence, no matter what. Even if you define it as material, if you define it as whatever, you don't escape the emergence problem, which is like the fractal scale issue too, and how like complexity gets sorted at different levels. One thing, if you know who Ben Levin is, or I think it's Michael Levin. Yeah, Michael Levin, not Ben Levin. I think that's a musician. Hold on. Let me see here, Michael Levin. Let me make sure I'm thinking about the right person. Yeah, you should check out Michael Levin's biology work. He's a biologist at the Tufts University, and he's been doing these incredible biological studies on, how would you even call it? Morphogenerative electric fields that are, so basically what they've found is you can take an organism, or you can take a cell that has literally DNA, like a human cell that has human DNA that should not, and what actually allows the morphology to generate is not like the DNA alone. That's like a substructure for it. What actually allows it to generate is this emergent relationship between this like bioelectric network in which the I'm not going to try to get it. It's some really crazy work. You should check it out. But I mean, that alone shows that they just published an article a month ago that literally shows like they have like biological not cyborgs. They call them, something biobots or something, I forget. But basically they can literally create xenobots. They can create entirely new organisms from pre-existing genetic structures that create and complete into morphological structures that are not encoded in the DNA, which means like actually there is emergence the whole way through with morphology, and like you can actually influence it. And in fact, life is super robust and rugged. It doesn't just grow into one form from the DNA. And so for a long time, we've had this notion that to develop new types of life, right, we have to go and do gene editing and do the DNA editing. But what we're kind of recognizing now is actually that's a tiny piece of it. I mean, not a tiny piece, that's a big piece, right? But you can basically take like a human cell that has a specific genetic code to do a certain thing and literally make an entire new organism that's not human at all, or make a new function, or make a new structure, or combine it around with other like it's about the network emergence that occurs between all the different cells. There's a whole lot of work coming out of his thing. I mean, I think he's going to win a Nobel Prize off this stuff very soon. So I'd recommend checking that stuff out. Yeah, morphogenesis is what he studies. Is some of the coolest stuff that I've ever heard. He basically takes like control of like a bioelectric network to like change cellular control, and then he develops like a development of like a bioinformatics, so they can model what they want to build with biology, and then just take cells and literally stimulate them into this electrical stuff, and it will literally create the blueprint that they had, which they didn't even mess with the genetics. Yeah, there's all kinds of, well, not just that, that is one of the original studies they did, but they just came out with 2 bigger studies recently that are a bit more complex than that, using human cells, not planarian flatworm cells. They did it with human cells now. And not just that, but they even were able to go towards something a little bit more complex too. So it's just so, the emergence, whether it's material, immaterial, whatever you want to think, there's emergence going on. And emergence is just the product of what perception sees when we necessarily can't have all the pieces of information and all the interactions at all the levels of scale. We have to have like a scale boundary that transitions across the thing, and then that's where the edge of chaos looks. But then once you're on the other side, it's ordered again. So it's a complex system problem, and our perceptions are not really attuned to handle complex systems very well. We tend to handle more like linear structures, and that's part of perception. So yeah, well, I agree with you, Lil. Emergence is a false construct. It's a useful narrative. I mean, emergence just simply means like too complex a relationship at that scale to see what it looks like from this side of the order, and then once you take the it's kind of like an analogy in a way. I don't think there's like emergence is like a specific thing. I mean, because it's a perceptual thing, once again, as I would say material is as well. But I would say that emergence shows up constantly. Shows up everywhere, right? Same with music. You have like macro levels, micro levels, meso levels, and then what after that? Well, then you take the same thing and you apply it to a slightly rhyming scheme around the edge of chaos, and you end up in a new thing. Does emergence have any predictive value? In some cases it does. I would say that not a lot, because by definition it's a complex dynamic system. It's a chaotic system that orders itself. So no, but I mean, we do have some interesting things. If you've seen like, if you go and look at like complex systems theory, if you look at recursive systems that we study, complex numbers, like if you look at the whole history of how we found the Mandelbrot set from the Julia sets, I mean, that's some really cool examples of emergence. It shows up in certain ways. There's good inferences. Emergence end up giving us not predictive power in a deterministic way, because see, that's kind of at odds of what emergence really is. It's kind of It's not exactly a linear system that creates it. It's a feedback loop between things and connections and some linear aspects. It's a complex system thing. And so since it's a complex system, like linear predictive powers we have is not really what we get from emergence, but we can use emergence as like a strong metaphor to take the models that we have at this scale and look at how they work at this scale and get a lot of good inferences throughout that. And so I think there's utility to understand emergence and utility in emergence, but predictive capacities, not so much. Systems are my favorite thing, Max Houghton. They have been since I was a child. I didn't know what they were called, but they've always been my favorite things. So yeah, and I've studied like complex systems. There's some really interesting books on systems theory. I could try to give you a reading list, but I don't have them necessarily all the books right here next to me. But they're in there. I have a whole bookshelf area for logic stuff and complex systems and whatnot. There's actually this really interesting book I started reading. It's an applied systems theory or general systems theory from this one guy who basically studied complex systems his whole life and created a kind of interesting model for those. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to learn. Yeah, you're a biologist, but you came from music, but you're a biologist. So yeah, I normally play more music, but you all got me talking about the other thing I'm really passionate about, which is just everything. So I like music because it's part of everything. But everythingness is what I'm most interested in. I would consider myself an everythingist. Not I do everything, because I don't think it's possible to do everything, but I think of everything as a material. The perceptual material of everything is literally all the things that possibly could be, and things are perceptual. So what everything becomes, whether it's an anything or something or a neither thing or not thing, they're all states and properties of thingness, and that's generated through perceptual properties of how we infer the worlds around things and stuff. So that way too. It's always been frustrating. People are like, so what do you like to do? I mean, I guess music, sure, and I like to teach and I like to think and read and do stuff, but really it's kind of, I just love everything. Ever since I was a child, I remember like I just love everything. Everything's interesting. Everything's fascinating. What's your favorite instrument? Probably percussion, drum set. Right now, at least. Lumitone or drums are probably my favorite right now. All instruments kind of are like the same, not mechanically, but like what the the pre-interface, if that makes sense. Are you interested in pop culture celebrities? Not really, no. I'm not really interested in like people, like I like people's ideas. I'm interested in ideas, not really people. I mean, I do, I like Ariana Grande, and I like, there's some like pop stuff I know or whatever, but that's because musical sounds and things I like. But what about politics? Yeah, I talked a bit about politics earlier. Someone tried to press me on some stupid issue or whatever. Or I shouldn't say it's a stupid issue because it's a serious issue, but the way that they were describing it in this very reductive way and trying to like this or that, it was kind of stupid. So yeah, I like political philosophy as well. Although I think that, I'm less so interested in philosophy that involves when there's a disagreement, and I'm more so interested in, yeah, exactly, Orbital Dog, super person, serious issue, very serious issue. But I'm more so interested in the way that we learn when we're connected. It's hard to overcome the you ought to trust. It's hard to overcome that in politics, and that takes authority. And I'm not really kind of an anti-authoritarian broadly, which is also why when people come in, it's like you must believe this or you must think this. It's like you're literally trying to control my thoughts. You can piss right off with that. What's your favorite chord you can play right now? Probably this. Let me turn the volume down so it's not so that it's not clipping when I play it. Probably this. It's not in 12. I can't quite get it on here properly. There's not enough range on this, but probably my favorite chord, at least in 31 right now. Probably a peak. It's a great chord in 12 too, but it doesn't exist in 12. If otherwise, It's yeah, let me go here and flip this over, make this a little quieter. I can't do the proper structure of it right now. It's too wide for what I have set up. I also really like this. Let me do it a different route. Hold on. About super majors, that's a fun question. What are good sevenths to add to a super major triad to make it feel more resolved instead of more tense like a super major seventh would? Well, let's see what we like. I don't think that sounds too unresolved. That's a super major triad. So I don't think super major triads are too unresolved in themselves. It depends on their intonation. It depends on what timbres they're playing them. But often with a super major 7 triad or super major 7, you can add like a Lydia sharp 11, like a like a augmented, super augmented 7. So something like this, something like a. And now it just sounds like a normal Lydian quality, even though it's super major. Do you like Dolomites? Yeah. I've actually met her in person. She's really cool. Really, really awesome person. I really appreciate her approach. It's very grounded. And I can tell she's very... How to not get trapped into endless improvisation when making music. Is that your goal? Is to not just be free? What is super gira? It is a Girian, or it's basically like a. So there's a temperament space called Mohajira. It's like neutral tonality, and then Girian is like the bottom structure, and then super gira is when you start on the bottom and you extend it all the way to the top. So it's like super Lydian, where you take Lydian and you keep going over and over and over with Lydian. But you do that with neutral tonality here instead, and you get a different form for it. Something like that's like super gira. And there's other voicings you can do that make it really cool, but that's a good example of it. So it's circular. It's like a spiral. It technically is circular because it's in 31, but it's a spiral because it hits all 31 pitches before it closes. So it goes around the circle of fifths. And have you listened to Zelda Breath of the Wild? No, I've not heard that soundtrack, but a lot of people comment on my neutral minor 7 video and go, Zelda? BOTTW? I don't know what they're talking about. I can only imagine they're talking about this kind of stuff. Or these, like, because I notice it happens around like the quintal and quartal marks. That's where everyone seems to like be identifying it as that, like that kind of stuff. But I don't think of that as like a Zelda thing. That's just a quintal and quartal harmony that's been used for, since like the 20th century harmony people for like over 100 years or something. So yeah, that's I don't really think of it as such. D major 7 is my favorite chord. Can you play it on a dreamy way on the piano? Sure. One of my favorite ways to make a major 7 chord a little more interesting. So there's a D major 7 you're talking about. I like to add a 13 in there, or you just play the 13 below. So you get something like... I like that a lot. Still all just the D major stuff. All that's just that D major stuff. I know, but I feel like every time people do chordal harmony online, it's like Zelda Breath of the Wild, Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's like chordal harmony, bud, not Zelda Breath of the Wild. I'm glad you think the whistling sounds unreal. I won't lie, it may sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but my lips are super dry right now because I've been streaming for the last bit, and I worked all day today, and so usually I can whistle a lot better when my lips are my lips aren't so dry right now. Do I whistle inwards or outwards? I whistle inwards. Ooh, Zach Rickenbach. Great callback. Good call there with that right there. XQQQ might be on. I want to. There's a whole bunch of tracks I really want to upload to my Bandcamp soon. That being one of them at some point. Yeah. See, I can usually hit that, but I'm a little dry right now. Is whistling inward even a thing? That's what I'm doing right now. Yeah, actually, Via is one that I've been thinking about releasing with XQQ. There's a bundle of tracks that are kind of in that same space of my life that I haven't formally released, that I've been thinking about formally releasing. Another one I have not released is a track called Polymorphing, which I think is, well, I spent so long on that. And then I remember one night when I was in Portland, Oregon, I had just moved to Portland. It was like literally the first month I was in Portland. And polymorphing was coming to life. I spent so long bringing it back to life and tuning it and making it sounded incredible. I went to export it and like it wrecked all my compressors, all my settings. And like since then I've not been able to get polymorphing to hit the same way. Is there a reason only one song is on Spotify? I'm really disorganized and I just haven't gone to like, you know, like whatever it's called, the distribution thing, and just put my music on there. I haven't done that. I need to though, but I have a lot of problems with like bureaucratic organizational stuff. Like for example, I'm in this crazy loop right now where I can't get yeah, I don't know. I'll maybe tell that story some other time. Zach Rickenbach, losing music is such a sad thing to hear. I agree very much. I still have the track Polymorphing. It sounds sick, but it doesn't sound as sick as it did that one night. And I have an updated version that's not mastered or mixed well, and I really want to do it. That's why I got a new computer, and I'm trying to basically install all the old programs I used to use, all the pathing, everything, certified don't you even get me started. Okay, fine, I'll tell you how messed up my executive dysfunction is. So I have this residency for music theory and music philosophy in Italy that I'm doing this March. I won this Spargliasco award thing, whatever. But the point being, I need a passport. And so I need a passport. So it just so happened I learned this last month when I had my birthday, like a little bit after that, my driver's license expired. So, oh crap, my passport's expired, my driver's license expired. I'm like, okay, no worries, I'll go to the DMV, get a new one. I go to the DMV, I go 3 times. Nope. I had to get like a court document from Seattle, Washington for like a name change thing that was a long time ago. And then I had to get like my birth certificate from Indiana. So I had to wait for all these things to come in. I finally got them all. I go to the DMV. Nope, I forgot to bring 2 pieces of mail. So I come back the next day. Okay, time to get this all taken care of. I give them all the stuff and the guy presses it all in and everything. Nope, DMV won't take my stuff because I have to actually update something on Social Security, which is crazy. So, because I've never had any problem like that ever. It's like California is like the only state that has to have that. So then I go to the Social Security office. This Social Security, because I have no ID at this point, I mean, no valid forms. I have lots of ID, or whatever, but no valid forms that are like photo IDs or whatever. So I go to Social Security, I look online, they tell me, well, since I have none of that stuff, the only thing that would work is my health insurance card. So I just got health insurance this month, basically, and I'm like, okay, cool, I got a card. So then I go to Social Security. I wait like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I finally get called, I give him all my stuff. The guy's like, oh, huh. He's like, well, this health insurance card doesn't have your date of birth on it. I'm like, what? What is this about? And then I could not update my social, so I can't get a driver, so I can't get my ID, so I can't get my passport. So then he said, sorry, the only way forward from here, the only way that I can get ID is if I go to the so I'm going to the doctor's office tomorrow, and I have to have a doctor write my date of birth and my name on a piece of paper on wet ink, and then bring it back to Social Security. And then after I do my Social Security, I can wait 2 weeks, and then it will process the DMV. Then I go back to the DMV, then I get my photo ID, then I go to the passport agency, and then I get my passport. I'm as many levels deep in the bureaucracy as is physically possible to be. There is no other I'm like past the bottom turtle. The bottom turtle was supposed to be like your health insurance card. I'm even below that. There's nothing even on their website that says where I'm at right now. So you want to talk about executive dysfunction? I know all about that. No, yes, I agree with that. Luckily, I've got some really awesome support network, like, my close friends, and I have a guardian angel, essentially, who helps me. Yakety sax moment, literally, it's fucking crazy. So, stupid bureaucracy. It is so stupid how we just like this thing has to go there, and then this and that and that and that. And they're all separate administrations and organizations, and they all require different criteria to get each other to even communicate. It is so silly. I literally feel like bizarro world moment. Do you ever compose with a specific story in mind, or are you more focused on the musicality itself? Both and neither. Usually when I compose, nothing's in mind except for the itness that I'm seeking, the itness of the whole thing. I don't know how to describe it. I call it the embodied. It's not about the object or the subject. See, if it was about just what I wanted, it'd be me as the subject, telling the object what to do. But yet if I was just listening to the musicality itself and focused on that, then it's the object telling me what to do. When in reality, it's like a unity between the two, what I call the embodied, where it's sort of like I'm giving my will through it, but then I'm also receiving the object back, and it discovers itself. The music kind of opens and finds its own way. I do come in often with a specific intention or something, but then what ends up happening is I have a specific intent I'm really careful with, or I care about a lot, and then I get slapped in the face by the object or the material itself, and it says, no, this is a better idea. You're going to do this instead. And I'm like, well, there goes my idea. I guess I'll try that idea some other time, because I see this new path in front of me I never would have came up with on my own. I never would have predicted, but the material and I had a conversation and found something new inside of it. So it's both and neither and all simultaneously, necessarily so in different ways. Like, for example, Hex. Hex is a piece that I had a spontaneous vision for when I was in, in 2020, I was in San Francisco. I was walking around at a mall near MoMA, near the Museum of Modern Art or whatever. I was with some friends, and it was I think it was 2020. And I was walking in this mall, and we were all just whatever in a line, whatever. And I just had this moment. It just hit me like a brick. And I was like, oh my gosh. I know exactly what the piece is called. It's going to be called Hex. I know exactly what it's going to be like. I know exactly what it's going to do. I know exactly what it's going to flow like and be like. And then it took me a long time to get it to be that way. And along the way, I discovered so much that I never could have predicted about it. But the ethos of it, the theme and the core was there. Would you ever dye your hair black? I'm actually dyeing my hair black Monday. Next time I stream, you'll see me with black hair. I used to have black hair. And then I went blonde for the last 2 years. Hey, Joey, we need to talk on multiple fronts, the siren stuff and the merch stuff. So, but it's good to see you. Hearts out to you, Joey. Love you. What's your natural hair color? This color, this brownish black hair. It's like a very dark brown. But I'm actually going back to black because I'm missing my moon goddess energy. I like the blonde because it feels so summery and cute and pretty and pastel-y, but at the same time, there's something about channeling the black hair that makes me feel more in tune with whatever energies in the world that I tap into to do what I do. So I need more moon goddess vibes. Half black. Luciana, I'm not even joking. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about keeping some of the platinum and then just doing an asymmetric black white hair. I don't know if I want that, but I definitely Oh, perfect. Yes, Joey. That sounds fantastic. I basically am free tomorrow. I have a meeting in the morning and then I have some other meetings around the afternoon, but the rest of the evening is pretty much free. We should try to connect then. Yes, let's talk soon for sure. Brown fits you, says Intellect. I haven't had brown. I'll probably do brown hair before black just because I haven't had brown hair in ages again. So I'll probably do that. But the black hair I feel is it's good because my skin's really pale and bright. So when I have black hair, it's super contrast. Whereas with the blonde, I kind of get washed out a little bit. Do you think music is the closest thing to magic in real life? Pretty much, yeah. There's a couple of reasons why. I mean, I think magic is real. So, but I have to couch what I define magic to be. Magic is the inverse of what is knowable, but does have a direct, real impact and pragmatic ability. So that's how I would define it. I don't think magic is some paranormal force, I'm casting fireballs in my bedroom or something. But magic is our inability to know all the certainties, yet our ability to organize our intent and ourself to create abilities which form, for example, even how belief modifies perception and manufactures what occurs, I think is pretty magic. You can literally change your own ways of thinking about things, and it necessarily changes all the choices that you make in your life that you're not conscious of. Right? So I think that there's a bit of magic there. And then when it comes to music, yeah, Joey, I'd agree with that too. When it comes to music, I think that magic is, well, yes and no, Jordan. Well, if you had a different therapist, they would say keep more magic. Read Richard K. Bandler. Read Using Your Brain for a Change. He's a therapist, psychologist, or whatever. You should read his stuff. He has there's even a book he has called The Structure of Magic, which is a therapy book, but in a way that it's not magic is oh, there's some paranormal thing, but a way to take advantage of your ability to have self-critical organization or not to hit a critical mass and self-organization to create outcomes and directional abilities. I did that recently to quit smoking weed. I was I smoked weed for years and years and years and years, and I was always doing it. Now I'm sober from weed, so I don't smoke that anymore. And it was really hard to quit until I sort of managed to organize a critical thing that allowed it to happen. But it wasn't even I was the one making the decision to quit. I mean, I made that decision to create the ground to create that effect, but then it kind of automatically played out in a way that solved that issue. Lovely having you here, Meadow Guy. Have a beautiful night, day. How do you get past all the music has already been written? It simply hasn't. I feel everything I write doesn't sound like anyone else's. So I don't know. I got over that a long time ago when I was over 14 years ago. I feel I got past that. So I just don't think. I think if you create directly out of your own intention, the whole of what you want, you're not writing a certain genre or a certain thing or you're just making what you want to make. It's necessarily going to be different if you have a ground has your own experience that's new and tempered in a way that you've actually put time through. So I don't know. I don't think that's. Hi, Noden. It's lovely to have you here. Art's the greatest spell we cast. Kind of agree with that in a way, The other thing about music that's really special is that it happens through time, which is really profound because most of the things that we do in life don't happen through time. And not only that, but not only does it happen through time, because for example, movies happen through time and dance, but also it's formless. I mean, there's form in the music, right? When the break happens or when the climb, whatever, there is form delineated through the quality, but it's invisible and formless when you're experiencing it. And it happens through time, and one piece is like, could be 10 minutes, right? Whereas like, you look at one art piece and it's like the compressed expression of time into this one thing that sits there, and then you update it as you look at it, sure. But there's something about music that's very particular in the sense that it has this time playing through it the whole way through. It's invisible and formless. It's way farther abstract than most things. Like I think that music is one of the best. I mean, I think that's why, for example, the Sufis and a lot of like different Hindu practitioners, have found across the world, like music is one of the fastest ways to obtain spirituality, one way or another. Whether your spiritual expression goes, a certain pattern as well. That's also why we see music basically used in every spiritual practice across the earth, including indigenous cultures that don't even have like, a standard version of what we think about religion, like through a Judeo-Christian lens or something like that. I think it's one of the most important things because it's the most akin to being. When you're listening to music, you are being, and you're being with the music, and it's happening, and it's through time, but it's formless, and so it forces you to only have the quality that you're experiencing, as opposed to any notions of what this word is or what that is or how this shape looks or anything. It's a totally different property, and it's the most sort of profound, I think, out of the arts, in my opinion, personally. I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I have an argument on my music theory Discord server, which, by the way, once again, if anyone wants to support the work I do here or whatever, I'll be publishing a lot more stuff for my music Discord soon. I basically just spent the last 3 months like developing my metaphysics further, making certain arguments, sort of grounding even deeper around things so that I can teach in a more universal way. I'm about to release a paper on vertically aligned objects and object-oriented harmony, along with I'm about to release an essay on the genesis of function. So like, where does tonal function come? Where does musical function come from? What is function? How do we generate new functions? How do we, where's function emerging from? So I'll be releasing that soon as well. So that's kind of exciting. I've been working a lot on those things. But yeah, if you want to support that, I'll just go ahead and post this link in chat before I do this. Here's the link to my Patreon if you want to check it out. For a couple months when I first made that Patreon, I was like doing a lot of scratch thoughts in there, but it turned into I wanted my thoughts to be more organized. So I kind of went back to my back room lab and started writing stuff, and then I'll post those things. I have a lot of stuff I'll be posting there soon. Also, a program has been developed in collaboration with myself and someone I care about very deeply. So part of vertically aligned objects are these, I manually hand created this thing called I thought of it as a vertically aligned wheel, or like a harmonic EDO wheel, but then the person who developed it, someone started calling it a Zeon wheel, for Ziana or whatever, and then the person who developed it, they call it a Zeal. So there's this program I have, I can maybe even show you, but it's done and it's built and everything, and it's an amazing way to demonstrate vertically aligned objects relative to any harmonic structures, any EDOs. Here, I'll go ahead and show you one. Let me drag this over my picture here. Wait, there we go. So that'll block me here. So check this out. This is 31 equal versus the first 64 harmonics of the harmonic series. And this is developed in a program that we can have it spit out static images or animated videos that show vertical alignment across the harmonic series and EDO thing, which are super useful for part of what theories I've created in the vertically aligned object stuff, because they allow you to see the vertically aligned objects, or VAOs as I call them, very, very easily. So here we can look for the vertically aligned objects. So this is 31 equal against, so this is a 3-octave object. So these lines here in the middle are octaves. So this is 1 octave of the harmonic series and also 1 octave of 31 equal. Here's another octave of the harmonic series, 16 to 32, and 31 notes here again, and then another octave of the 64. And then what will happen is these little green marks in here tell you how approximated you are. If you have a green number, that means that 31 equal, when centered on and interpreting it as this vertical point in the harmonic series, it supports this contiguous structure of harmonics. And then you have the green here that tells you the approximation error. Now I currently have it set for vowels so that there is no plus or minus beyond 2.5 cents. So plus 2.5 cents is the max I'll consider an alignment. Negative 2.5, the max I'll consider alignment. But even then, if one was 2.4 cent positive and one was 2.4 cent negative, well, I mean, now you're looking at nearly 5 cents, which is not vertically aligned. So this allows you to also quickly interpret the bias of the objects you have, if they're all sharpwise, if they're all flatwise, if they're truly balanced. So the green lines here in the center will tell you how close the approximation is. The red will tell you that it's sharpwards, and the blues will tell you that it's flatwards. So I can play all the blues in relation to 8, and then it tells me all the great alignments. And now I can go ahead and hit play, and we can see how 31 equal aligns against all 64 harmonics here. And we can see this pattern that starts to form, this vertical alignment pattern, and then it tells us all sorts of different things about what harmonics, not harmonics, but what harmonic modes are supported, and for how many octaves and how deep the structures can be, and how concordant those objects can form to be. So for example, if I were to hit stop on this when I align near 32 or 31, so I've got 31 equal, and one of my favorite vowels in 31, which is my next rare chords video, by the way, is this one. I stopped it a little bit early. Hold on. There. This is one of my favorite vowels that 31 equal has. So when you tune into the 31st harmonic on 31 equal, I know that sounds weird because they're both 31. It's just a coincidence. So the 31st harmonic in 31, it doesn't have that when it's over 8. So if you treat like a root like this, I can't play a 31st harmonic off a root. But if I treat the root as the 31st harmonic, then it gives me this really, really beautiful structure of 31's in tune, the 53rd harmonic's in tune, and the 58 harmonic is in tune. And of course the 58's in tune because the 29th right below it's in tune. So there's these two really great alignments in 31 that show up, and they end up creating this really beautiful object, which basically you can play it in isolation in 31 where you have a root, super major 6, and then a perfect 7, and then listen to how beautiful this structure ends up being. Or amazing. Do you hear how fused that is? How it kind of like melts into itself? Yeah, so this allows us to predict like concordant hyperobjects in any equal divisions of an octave against any structures of the harmonic series. Another one that we can see as vertically aligned structure inside of, it's a whole new class of like harmony that I've been mapping out and I'm writing an essay on and such. And people missed it for a long time because people have always thought about, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word for it in math. Where things can combine and mix. I forget what they're called. They're sets that basically can be hybridized. But in this case, each is its own dependent, unique set that can't be combined. I forget what it's called. I'll try to remember that some other time. But so check this out. If we then let the alignment run again, another really cool alignment that happens in 31, we can see when I hit on the 11th harmonic. So I'm going to wait for my octave lines to come around to 11. It's a part of group theory. There's a word for non-abelian groups where they're not connected. They're you can't just mix them. They're not associative. They're unique structures based on their orders. Okay, here we go. Now I'm on the 12th or 11th harmonic again. The 11th harmonic has some really cool stuff in the overtone series here too, or in 31 as well. 11 to 18 is pretty much pure. That's pretty cool. I'll let it run even further. Let's go all the way to 13. Do you have an organization? You just never know. That's what's amazing about it, Malazzo. There's even some on 12 equal. Like for example, if I come over to 12 equal and I play this vowel, you never know what the vibe will be with the vowel. You just know it'll be clean. So weird. That's like an over 17 vowel in 12 equal. And what's weird about it is half steps in the bass should always kind of get muddy. But when you play it on this vowel, they don't really get muddy. So for example, I'll do another here. It's hard for me to do with one hand. I need multiple hands for this, but yeah. So now I'll run this through to 13, and I already did. I'll pause it here. Do you have an organization? So no, that's the best part about vowels is they don't tell you if it'll sound this way, or they just tell you it's going to be concordant and it's going to give some interesting effect. You don't know if it'll be pretty, don't know if it'll be out. You got to play it to see what it'll be, and there's a complete unalignment against them because the harmonic series is infinitely irregular, right? It's a divergent series that never converges. And so since the equal temperaments are equal, every vowel is like a different interpretation. Do different vowels show up to different instruments with different harmonics? A vowel would be a vowel, V-A-O, not vowels or vowels. It's this vertically aligned objects. Basically, they're objects that are supported by equal temperament systems, which are an approximation of a continuous section of the harmonic series, and you omit all the errors. So for example, this is one of 13 equal's most clear ones, or sorry, not 13 equal, 11 or 31 equal. Sorry, I flipped 13 and 31. Okay, so when I land on the 13th harmonic here in 31, boom. Look what we also get near perfect. We get 13 essentially perfect, relative to 17. So we get a 13-17 and then a 13-17-19. This is a beautiful structure. Sounds like this in 31. Gorgeous. It's basically a sub-fifth, sub-fourth. It has this really, really interesting color to it. And then you can bring it into 12. You can not 12. You can bring it into more concordant stuff or more consonant stuff like this. Said the earlier root is tuned to the harmonic. Yes, exactly. You pretend you orient the root on a harmonic, not a root on a 2, like what we normally like. When most people talk about 31 equal, they'll be like, oh, 31 equals so cool. It's got a 5-4 and a 7-4, like this. Right? That's a 4-5. All that is this though. That's an interpretation of the harmonic, or that's an interpretation of 31 from the reference frame of this, of like the prime 2 or primodal 2 basically, which then gives you 8-10. You can see that's what I just played. 8-10-14. You can see that's what I just played. That also presupposes that 25 will be in tune and 28 will be in tune and 35 and 40. If we were to run this all the way up to 198, that's where you'll get the rose chord, which has the 131st harmonic interpreted above the structure, because that's aligned over 8. Are there any works in orchestra for these tuning systems? Great question. Well, that's actually something I've been exploring and interested in doing. I've been thinking about writing a string orchestra work in which the string players are supposed to play in 12 equal with nearly no vibrato. And when they play in 12 equal, they don't know it, but they're playing pure objects from like the harmonic series that are now brought through in the intonation of 12. And so that's what I want to do. Not just only possible in strings, possible in anything that has 12, because technically 12 has vowels too. All they do is play in 12 like I normally read, but then the sounds are going to vibrate in a completely different way. Now, someone said, where can I find literature on this? On my Discord right now. I mean, this is a technique that I invented. I guess you could call it, I mean, yeah, discovered or codified or created or whatever. I've not heard anyone talk about it this way. I went and I started manually calculating all the vowels in 31. I ended up finding a lot of them. And then so I started counting them in other places too. And then eventually there was a developer on my Discord server who created a script that essentially calculated all the vowels for all the EDOs up to 53. And then I had my other friend who, she's amazing. She basically it's been a passion project for the last couple weeks. She basically created a program now that lets me actually visualize them in this way and customize the visualizations and stuff. So I'd never heard anyone talk about this kind of approach. I mean, certainly approximating things with the EDOs is like a common approach, right? But then looking at all these different ones that are simultaneously in parallel approximated from the relative positions, then I've never heard that, or them identified as a class within themselves with the EDO, because it flips. And of course not, because most people hadn't thought very high in primes in the harmonic series, or if they did, it was like only in a harmonic series context. Whereas since primodality is what I've been developing for a long time and I've been thinking through, primodality has caused me to interact with other objects in very different ways that has led to me just looking towards areas that weren't really looked at because they presuppose a lot of high primes and a lot of deep harmonic work, and that's just deep harmonic series stuff. So yeah, it's a completely new class of like harmony. I mean, the alignments aren't, but like when you think all the alignments that the EDO has as objects and then you see the voicings on them, those are a new class of objects and they're all unified by the fact. What is primodality? I have an entire 3-hour stream I did like 3 years ago called Theory of Primodality. It's not the best best description of it. At this point, I've developed my theories way more. You can find a lot about it on my Discord server. I'm eventually going to have a paper, and that's what I'm going to work on in... Yes, I have, as well as Asylum. Well, it depends on what you mean by discover. I don't think we necessarily discover new functions. We simultaneously create and discover them within the context of what we could discover relative to the things we do. There's a lot of stuff there to unpack. That's why I'm making that essay about what function is, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand how function comes to be. But no, I mean, I posted some new function as well on neutral chords, a new sort of tonal function movement with neutrals. And then yes, these can stand in as functions because they're vertical objects, or you can take them as their own ways and stitch them through different forms. Are they documented somewhere in the Zen wiki? No, they are not. I haven't really contributed to the Zen wiki. I will once I finish my thoughts or whatever, but yeah, I haven't put those there. Let's see, it's amazing. Programmers are dope. Yes, they are, especially when I tell them what to do and they go do it. That's what I had to do. Have you ever taken engineering classes, researched DSP for it? No, but I understand DSP and Fourier transform. I certainly don't have the pragmatic ability to just go do some DSPing, right? But like I understand like the logic of it and structures of it and such. Yeah. So it's interesting stuff. Now, do you experience music synesthetically? Yes, multimodally, necessarily. So, let's see. So, I mean, I think we're all technically synthetic because the idea of synesthesia, I mean, yes, I have direct synesthesia, but more compound too. But even the notion of synesthesia implies that we only hear what we hear, when in reality, like, since we have grounded cognition, it's like all our sense streams melt into the same perceptual stream. So that's something that the Gestalt theorist Max Wertheimer and many other people postulated very early in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, which is like there was a lot of arguments like, what if we only have one sense? We have different modalities, but what if we only have one sense? And that's kind of what they ended up finding in perception, is that we perceive pretty similarly across our senses. There's a lot of inferences about this. If you blindfold someone, you draw like equally spaced dots on their arm and you poke them and you change the timing between the poking, people literally feel as if you've moved bigger distances. And that's also something that occurs with our visual field and with the auditory. So we kind of process the senses all the same way, even though they're different multimodal stuff, and so they have different content that's irreducible out of the stream that you get it through. But yes, definitely like that. I was going to try to find this 12 equal piece that I was making that basically only uses vertically aligned structures to go through. But and then here is, for example, here are vertical alignments up to the 128th harmonic in 31 equal. So this would be like a giant 31 equal chord that I could play that is just a giant harmonic series structure. This is a static one, so it's got 4, 5, 7. We know that, everybody knows that. Well, I know everyone in microtonality knows that. That's a common one. 25, we know that because it's got a good 5, and so since it's got such a near perfect 5, you can obviously do 2 5s, and 2 5s will give you 25. So the 25, but you see the error starts to build up here. There's twice as much error as there is here, so it starts to get even further sharpboards away from the place. 28, of course we have 28 because we have 14. It's the same error because it's just 7. And of course we have 7. So 35 again, we have a good 7, and we have a good 5. So when they combine, voila, we get an alignment of 35. 49, well, we've got a good 7. It's a bit there, it's a bit flat. So we do 2 of them, and voila, now we have a 49 as well. 50 again, we have a 10, and we have a 5. So it would suppose that we could get all the way there. And we can see 131. Oh, we can't see it, but 131 I like quite a lot. 107 is really cool, and 31 equal as well. It's a cool structure to interpret over the rest of the things. If we were to look at like different vowel structures, if we were to build on 11, for example, we'd get this kind of alignment object. So here's 4 octaves built on 11 of 31. So we see the 11, 18, that's cool. Let me pull this over more. 11, 18, cool, 23. So that's an object right there. I actually don't think I've played that one. 11, 18, 23. Let's do it. Let's see how it sounds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull up Scala. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my Scala here, and I'm just going to drop Scala in, voila, right here. And now I've got the Scala. I'm just going to go ahead and open list of chords so I can just see what sense the 11, 18, 23 is. 11, 18, 23. Okay, so it's about, it's got a mid 6 and a so it's this object. I'll add some vibrato so it sounds a little cleaner. I'm going to lower it in pitch 2. This is just intonation. This isn't in 31. And then I'm going to lower it a little bit. Okay, so it's kind of a dissonant structure, but it will sound something like this if I come over here and actually play that alignment of 11, 18, 23. Cool, and then we're looking for the flat 9, which is basically two diasteses up. So here will be this one. So it's that one. And now if I just play them all together, we should hear. Pretty dissonant object. It's still concordant though. It doesn't really wrestle or shake. It's kind of a dissonance that sounds fused. is a kind of a dissonant object. We keep stacking it up. So that's the thing with, you don't know how it's going to sound, but you just know it will be concordant. So it's hard to put your finger on all the ways. You just got yourself a new patron. Well, thank you very much for the support. I appreciate it very much. I love being able to do music, and I'm increasingly being more fortunate to where, I have a day job where I teach like voice, which I actually love that. I'll probably never stop doing that, just because it's like a phenomenological, like counter grounding process where I have to teach people extremely difficult skills that they don't have in order to change their life through it. It's a weird thing. It's where I got a lot of my understanding about the world through, I would say, other than music first and that stuff. But I'm really happy to be able to, any support for music, because then I can focus more of my time on it, and I can build more in it and focus more through that. So I really appreciate that. No pleasure for music, but my theory is, as a kitty, associated music with annoying music. Jingles. Yeah, what's interesting is my brother, C-Man33712, my brother was kind of like that for a while. He was not really into music for a long time. My brother wasn't. And something just randomly changed. I don't know. He was kind of into it every now and then, but then he just never, something happened. Now he's super into music, and I'm super happy for that, because I think music is seriously one of the best things that humans have, that we've created and we have to offer to the universe. So I feel like it's kind of a fractal of creation. I feel like the universe is just changing, permutating, moving and progressing, and music is always that process. And so in a way, music feels a little bit like a spiritual fractal of the broader universe discovering itself. So I really like this vowel a lot. That's the first one I played, and it can extend all the way up to, further. Well, these are the two same ones. So we've got two, same ones. Okay, this is the first new extension here, and the repeated extension. So yeah, there can be all sorts of lovely, cool ways of doing things with vowels. But these are just in 31. The 12 equal ones are kind of fun. Actually, do I have a video of the 12 equal ones I can show? I'm going to be making a YouTube video on vertically aligned objects soon. The person who made the zeal thing, they actually just messaged me today and were saying that they just did a bunch of new quality of life updates and did some really cool things with it. So I'm excited to see what new updates are there, and then it'll make the video even better, because I can just export videos to use in the video. Here's 12 equal against the fifth octave of the harmonic series. So there's only one octave here in both, and so we can almost see how 12 aligns with things. Most of the time it'll be perfect fifths. Every perfect fifth is guaranteed to be aligned, which is why some of these pop up in a consistent form. Like when I go to 40, 60 will light up simultaneously, no matter what, because we're always going to have the 2 to 3 or 3 to 2. See? Then 60 lights up, but it'll be a little bit off depending on where you stop it at, because it's not a perfect fifth, a true perfect fifth as we have in 12. It's about 2 cents flat. So all the perfect fifths will always land slightly flat relative to their vowel objects and so forth. But there's some interesting alignments. Like on 17, if I go to 34, we can see an interesting 12 equal alignment, although it might not be that interesting with only one octave. But if I align here to 34, we should see some interesting stuff. We should see the one right next to it is active. Not quite. There, 36. Yeah, so that 34, 36 is a really interesting structure to play around. That's what I was playing here. Etc. It's hard to do with one hand or two hands on a piano, though, because it becomes extremely wide as it progresses further. So yeah, those are some things I've been working on in the primordial stuff. That's what I'm going to work on in Italy, basically. That's what my project proposal was. That's what I got the award for. So I'm excited to do that, because I feel like I've been talking about primordiality for a long time. I've gotten better understanding of it than ever, but there's not a lot of good public. I mean, I made that video 3 years ago, where it's okay, but I didn't fully grasp the thing, that I knew now, or that I didn't fully grasp it. And I've been trying to continue to understand it better and further and deeper. And I'm really excited to create a really strong resource that shows people and explains what primordiality is. Because, I had a conversation in a microtonal server the other day about this. A lot of people misinterpret primordiality to be like, this is a scale you use. It can be like that, totally, but it's more so like the primary colors of concordance. It's like a way to understand where the concordance patterns are emerging from, and not just that, but the most irreducible patterns of concordance. So if there's like a weird interval that's like, whoa, that's a dissonant interval, how could you ever use that? Like a 448 cent naiadic sort of middle quality. It's like, wow, how do you make that sound concordant? That's not in the harmonic series, or it's not in 2, but it is in the harmonic series at some places. So when you bring it into alignment with the rest of its Gestalt family that it irreducibly stems from the object of concordance, or that hyperobject of the harmonic series, then it literally fuses it all and like creates like a context that the interval that couldn't make sense before makes sense. So it's kind of like it's more of a perceptual technique. Or it's kind of, I talk about it on my server. I'm going to be posting a bunch of new things to talk about it beforehand. But anyways, I need to go actually because my food is here. I ordered some Indian food a while ago. I love Indian food. It's probably my favorite food that exists. I can't have gluten. I'm celiac. So Indian food is like almost all naturally gluten-free except for obviously like pita and stuff like that. Or naan, excuse me, not pita. Like naan and some other things, but I love Indian food. So if there's any Indian individuals out in chat, thank you for wonderful food. Bless. Seriously. Anyways, I'm gonna hop off here. It's been a great pleasure. As always, thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting. I can't wait to share some cool stuff I've been working on. I've been a little bit of a hermit the last month, but all in do well time. I had to rebuild my computer, which honestly was like probably the biggest frustrating thing ever. I also got into a video game. I haven't played video games in forever, but my girlfriend and we found a video game we both like together, so we've been playing that a little bit too. I've actually been working on Hex and it's almost done. I think I'm going to release it before my album's finished. I was thinking about saving it for the full-length album, but honestly, I think I'm going to release it ahead of time because I've been working on Hex for so long. I'm so sick of working on it that I just want to get rid of it. And I actually changed. I'm going bar by bar. For the last week, I've been going bar by bar and actually finishing it from the start. Like everything sounds so sick now. And like I was having problems with the intro for a really long time. And I feel like I've landed on something that I like a lot more, like intro wise. And some of the form is changing a lot. And so I think I'm going to just finish it, release it, get it out. That'll be like a single. And then I'll follow up with my LP. The LP's coming closer to being finished. I really, really, really want to finish it. I'm going mad not having it finished. Oh, excuse me. Yawny yawns. Let's see here. I might be able to play a little sample here. It sounds so fire. Oh my god. Because since I got this new computer, like I can actually like open Hex without it lagging and breaking and scratching. And I was at my total peak limit of like my ability to even run Hex and finish it. So I had to fork it into an entire other project file to work on like half of it there, and it was making it really hard to mix and do things. So I had to install every program in the same way, the same file pathing, and the same architecture, plus more, and now I have it so I can like open up my biggest project files. Not all of them. I'm going to try to make it so every single project file that I ever have done is like, it just opens like that constantly. But let's see here, Hex Reconstruction 2024. I'm actually curious. I'm going to try to open Hex on stream here really fast, okay? I've not ever tried to open it because it's a giant file, but I'm wondering if I can actually run... I wonder if I can actually run this while I stream. Let's figure it out. All right, so here we go. I guess I'll let you... Well, okay, here we go. We're loading it up. Okay. There, I'm back. I'll let you know when it's done loading it, and then I'll pull it on screen and show you it all. Yeah, I've never even been able to open any project file like this on stream without it literally just like killing my computer. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this is a powerhouse computer. I did not hold back. Every computer I've ever had has been a budget build except for this one. So love that. I've got like 128 gigs, or I think I have more than 128 gigs of RAM. My processor's super dope. I have the 3990, whatever it is. I don't know, all kinds of stuff. I could pull up my specs, but it's a monster machine. Yes, it feels so good. It feels so good. All my life, I've like had like budget builds. Well, I take that back. My first laptop ever wasn't a budget build. It was like the only like big ticket item I was able to get when I was younger, like big picture wise. And that ended up becoming a laptop that I used for 9 years and like toured on and like played music all over and wrote almost all my early work on and stuff. My first 3 albums I wrote on it, to be honest, on that laptop. Yeah, I've got a 1300 gigs of RAM, or 130 gigs of RAM, basically. AMD Ryzen 9, I have the GeForce RTX 4090. It's just a banger. So yeah, 13,000 gigs. I wish that. Yeah. And then a whole bunch of other cool stuff. The storage is like incredible. That's like 5 tabs of shut the fuck up. Okay, true. You're not wrong. Okay, let's see. It's like going from playing on a normal violin to a Strat. And that's kind of how it feels. Unironically, yes. Literally. It's actually insane. The craziest thing is just like how like it loads these giant projects like so fast. Like Hex used to take on my old computer. Every time I would try to run it, it would take like maybe like 10 minutes to open it every time. And now like Hex opens like, well, usually it opens faster than this, but it's not cached because I restarted my computer last night. So we'll see while I'm also streaming how long it takes. It looks like it's almost done. It's already into the audio portions, and as opposed to just the, looks like it already got the effects through. Okay, and then we'll see this. I have a whole bunch of, it's gonna be messy. Green tubes of coolant. True. Lane type beats. Let's go. I'm glad that you think you found the best stream ever. Really, that's really amazing. New stream, Orbital Dog. Awesome. I'm super glad to hear that. I would definitely stream more. I streamed a bit more over the summer, and then I ended up tearing down my setup a little bit because we like went into a studio and I wasn't the overhead piano, and then certain things, whatever things happened, I fell off around September. But now I'm getting to a place where everything's organized, and we're coming up into the spring. I'm a big seasonal person, so like when the spring happens, it's like everything's possible, I feel amazing, and then like when the winter happens, like everything's great, I feel amazing, but I'm just kind of I'm reading. I read so much this winter, so much. I learned so much, and there's still so much to learn, and I feel like I barely even scratched the surface of what is knowable, and I don't even think we can even come close to knowing half of what is knowable. Not even half, not even a fraction. I don't even think we can even come to understand even a tiny piece of this universe. Only our own piece. Also, Benzel, I think I'm going to be at Genesis. Okay, here we go. It's loading. Okay, here we go. Oh, it loaded. Oh, it's so good. Okay. You all want to see Hex? I will show you Hex. Let's see here. I can't put it on this screen because I've got my camera in my like corner webcam thing or whatever. This isn't a real camera. It's like, kind of like glitchy or like weird and broken. So let me try to get this set up right. Let's see. Primary monitor. It's got to be this one, right? Oh, there we go. We are here, folks. So let me resize this. There we go. Okay. Whew. So this is part of it. Yeah, it's right now it's sitting at a running length of about 12 minutes. I've been working on this since about 2020, and it says here 78 hours, but this is like not even close. There's like so many more hours that are put into this that don't even get caught. This isn't even the audio tracks. I have an entire other separate file specifically for Hex's voice stuff. Can you hear that? Oh my gosh, can I actually run it without ASIO being on? Or can I run it on this driver here? Let's see. Yeah, so there's just a whole lot of stuff. It's also ridiculously stupid like this that has a bunch of shit in it. said, can't believe, I'm glad that you like that. Are hex and witchcraft related thematically? Yes, they're on the same LP. Witchcraft is, you want to know a secret? Witchcraft isn't an EP, it's a single. Right? It's like a 20-something minute single. But by the time I released it, I was like, damn, is anyone even going to listen to a 20-minute single? So I divided it up into the 3 movements that it had, and I was like, okay, here's an EP, because it's technically EP length as a single. So no, this is literally one-to-one connected with the theme of that whole album. It's, I really like, there's a couple parts that are kind of messed up still, but I really like some of this stuff here. Needs to be mixed a bit more. There's also some glitches that I need to fix. This is acoustic piano from my home that's tuned in JI. Yeah, and I need to fix a lot of this here because when I transported it over, some of these things were not too correct. It's hard to describe why, but there's certain things some of the vocals here and some other spots. Do you record all your sounds or use samples or both? Both. Probably like 60-70% of the samples in this are mine, and then there's some that, you know, I've gotten from Splice, or I've gotten from like, you know, free samples, things that I've had for years or whatever. But no, like all these, like I have to make because it's all free pitch JI. So like this is something I recorded a long time ago. This rain, all this rain is mine. I have a huge collection of rain samples that I recorded from Indiana when I was staying there a lot, and we had these big thunderstorms. All these tone clouds are my samples for certain because they're in different. This is in these are in these weird tuning systems. 16th hi-hats are, I mean, the only things I tend to maybe not use are like, you know, occasionally some like kick samples or some cool snares or just some effects, or I mix things in, but I always process things to where they're, you know, in alignment with the piece. In fact, with this piece I went bar by bar and I manually tuned the sub for every single bar because it's all free pitch JI. So I literally went around bar by bar and exported from my synth. I manually would use like fine tuning and fine tune like the sub bass into each hit, and then I would export those and freeze and bounce them and then bring them back through, and then I ended up having these like different bass structures at each point that reflect kind of what's going on. So yeah, there's a lot that has been going through this, and then of course this section here, all these samples are from the Digitact, actually analog. Or pseudo-analog, right? It's a digital thing, but these kinds of... these kinds of samples, or like this here, these are things I played on my on my Digitac. So what I did is I passed a bunch of these things over to my Digitac, and then I made beats on there. Luckily, this track, this section of the track, this really heavy part, this section had a completely different beat for a really long time. And it really was bothering me because I didn't like the rhythm section here, even though like it was like this, I had made this like tribal beat thing. You can't hear it because it's so distorted here, but there's like this tribal beat thing. There's like, I had like a taiko type structure that I made with like a sample library that I have. And then there was like these, which was like, I created these and sampled them back in. So there was like all these like little like rhythmic things that were going on, and I wasn't a huge fan of it for a while. And then I ended up getting the Digitact in here, and it was just like... Yeah, this section became a lot cooler. Now, it was a bit mixed better on my old computer, but for some reason, something with the distortion on one of these tracks, particularly on this track state here, everything that's under this is compromised right now. So there's certain things I need to fix, but they'll be fixed shortly. All these ones. Yeah, here we go. These kinds. They should be sometimes they're too clean when they should, I don't know. So I'll figure that out and I'll fix that stuff later. And then the ending is like really cool. I like the ending quite a lot. So this is my cello. Ooh, I did like these. Oh, let me find this little harmonic. A lot of this stuff was my cello. So for example, this, or this maybe. This is all cello. Analog cello. All that weird shit is just literally cello. So I had a lot of fun doing that. It was all cello. Yeah, no effects. That's funny. What are my favorite distortion plugins? Well, that's changed since I got my new computer. I just got this program. Let's see, I'll open here. I love Homicide, which, by the way, thank you, Ohmforce, for making that free, by the way. I literally never thought they would. I was stressing because I couldn't find my Homicide plug. I couldn't find the stuff for it. And I was like, fuck, what am I going to do to get Homicide? It's like one of the most important plugins I use. They made it free. You just literally go to the Homicide website and it's literally free. And it says Ohm Sweet Ohm. They literally just made the program free. I can't even believe it. So big ups to Ohmforce. If you're listening, you probably aren't ever. I mean, why would Ohmforce be listening to this? So that's super fire. I also use a lot of Trash too as well. Love Trash. Different structures here in Trash. And then by far, I just got this plugin this week and it's completely changing my perspective. That's actually why the string tone cloud distortion stuff is kind of messed up in this track, because I got rid of one of them and I replaced it for, okay, I don't know who needs to hear this. Go get this fucking program. If you're a VST or if you're a producer, go get RC20. I can't even believe this program. Everything there in one place. Oh my God, multiple forms of it. It's just incredible. It sounds amazing. It works amazing. It's just so easy, so simple. It's just like, oh my gosh. You need to make something trashy. You need to make something more noisy. You need to make some color. Oh my gosh, just get it. It's so good. So those are my favorite distortions right now. Trash 2, RC20, and then the Homicide. I also use Wave Shaper, which is one of the wait, is it over here? Wait, one of these tracks has some Wave Shaper on it, which is manual wave shaping somewhere. But wait, what are these fruity wrappers? This should be, I don't know what those are. I'm gonna have to look at those later. They might be that might be some of the. Anyways, I'm still sorting out this track because taking it from the old computer. Here's Wave Shaper. Taking it from the old computer to the new computer was a big problem. So I'm in the process of going through and making sure everything works right. I've also used Fruity Wave Shaper, which is just a very simple, you get more basic control. Arturia's distort coal-fire. I might get it then. I'm a bit of a distortion fan. Okay, so I will check that out. All right, there you go, everybody. There is some of this track. So yeah, hopefully it'll be done soon. I made a joke. I hope it gets finished before World War III, but it seems like we're already there. Like, I literally got beat by World War III. So, we got to work on this and finish it ASAP. And then a lot of the a lot of this stuff, the MIDI stuff is all JI. I love this tone. It's like a unstringed tensioned piano with a lot of vinyl noise through it from the RC20. Oh, that timbre's so sick. Yeah, so I'm excited to finish this. I've been trying to finish this forever. This is the piece that came into my mind when I was in the mall. Some more of the things. They have this is tuned in a really weird tuning. It's this tuning I created. It's like a sus tridecimal thing, a tridecimal sus 2 add 10 thing. So it doesn't scroll linearly as a tuning. It goes I like to build tunings sometimes that never have a note that you could play never a note that you could play that doesn't sound super good. So then I can just mash around and have a lot of fun. What's this one? Pigments. All sorts of things. Oh, basin. All this is in that sus tridecimal stuff. Okay, I should probably hop off here and eat some food. Wait a second. How do I turn my camera back on? It'll probably be hold on. I don't even know how to come back into this. Is this it? No. Anyways, I'm probably just going to hit end now so you can't see me, but I'm waving at you all, okay? Thanks for the support. I will be making more music and releasing music and loving music, of course. So have a beautiful rest of your day. May the universe bless you with all sorts of wonderful inspirations and creations. And yes, be well. Try to recognize object and subject are not as separate as we intend or think they are to be. Be well, have a beautiful day, and have a beautiful evening.